Ladies and gentlemen, two different close-ups going on here. So this is an interesting project. This is one of two for Pete, and what I'm doing is I'm converting two 7-string ers into two ultra-wide 6-string ers. And why am I doing that? That's the first question, isn't it, really? Let me put this camera up here a minute, out of the way. We can sort of fly all over it, I suppose. Ooh, look, it's a Shecter Diamond Series Hellraiser 7-string plastic nut. Tired looking frets. I mean, not tired, sorry, they're just tarnished. Hardly played, really. I don't imagine too many 7-strings are played to death. EMG pickups there, 7 through holes. I've already extracted those things, bushings for the bridge, the original bridge, which looked like, well, the bridge looked like this, 7-string bridge, in sort of dark nickel colour. But we're going to get rid of that. And so the question is, why am I doing this at all? I'm doing this because, sorry about this, Pete came across a video I'd done on my YouTube site in which I had made a conversion. I've done a conversion for, oh god, I've got to plug this in. Sorry, is this plugged in? Is it? Yep. In which I did, take this out again, sorry, a video. I did a conversion for a couple of other customers actually. One called Steve, hello Big Steve, and one called Vince. And for both of those gentlemen who had huge hands, they were never really been able to play a standard size guitar, so they kind of missed out on the joy of playing. And they asked me if I could do something for them, and together we I think in the case of Steve, we together looked at the possibility of what could we do with is it possible we could do something with a 7-string guitar, and what would it require? Now, in the first instances with those particular guitars, at the time there were a few of a particular brand of guitar. It was a PV, I forgot what it was called now, but a PV guitar, 7-string, which a few of them had turned up in somebody's B stock or in a container somewhere, and they all had a bit of tarnishing and a bit of rust, but actually they weren't that bad, and we were able to convert them, and they become actually surprisingly playable 6-string guitars, or ultra-wide 6-string. But they weren't absolutely ideal partly because I'm running ahead of myself. What makes this conversion possible is a bridge made by Schaller, thankfully, and it's this thing, they call it the STM bridge, and I call it the 3D bridge because it's not that easy to see in the black and white, the black version. This bridge is unique amongst bridges. It's a kind of tune-o-matic bridge, okay, so despite my normal reticence, this bridge has something about it which makes it unique and perfect for this job. The saddles wind sideways, okay, so you can actually change the overall complete width of the string spread on this by pushing these both out to the edges and then spreading the rest out in between. Excuse me. That alone makes it possible to convert this 7-string into a 6-string and be able to put the strings much wider apart than any standard 6-string bridge possible. So the truth is, this is quite wide down here, and by the time the strings are down here, they don't come right out to the edge because it's just not feasible. At the widest we go, the strings are, well, they're not too bad. They're about 4 or 5 mils in from the edge. Still much wider than a standard 6-string. So to make this whole thing work, we have to first of all fill in using this bridge, which is the key to making this work, then imposes a couple of other things. So first of all, we have to say, actually, can we reach where the strings need to be? Will this bridge allow us to go high enough? And I can see that it's a wind-up bridge rather like a tune-o-matic, and we should be able to get it up to that height without too much problem. When you're converting a 7 to 6, sometimes you'll get a 7-string guitar with 7 individual poles on the pickup, and a 6-string ultra-wide looks kind of odd because the strings don't sit over the original 7 poles, so it's obviously a kind of mismatch. realistically speaking, it doesn't sound too much different. And I think you'd have to be listening, or you'd have to be quite a experienced musician, recording type person to really pick up the sort of slightly phase shifty sort of sound as you maybe bend the string in and out of the poles. But of course, a perfect solution to that is to have pole-less pickups or rails, and in this case these are EMGs, active EMGs, and they are pole-less, so we won't have anything that looks particularly odd. The 6 strings will run down there pretty well. We don't want a guitar that's a 0 degree neck angle, because what happens is, actually it's not too bad because this actually sits quite low. By the time we've got our little footing in, this is wrong colour, I've got an old chrome one here, but actually by the time we've got our footing in here, you can see this whole thing into the ground level. It's pretty shallow, that sort of gap there. So actually on a 0 angle bridge, it might just work, but it does kind of suit a slightly angled neck body join. This is the first of the 2 guitars. The second one is a Matt Heafy Epiphone, kind of Les Paul lookalike thing, which is also 7, and in the case of that one, I think it has a stop bar. Now in this one, what we'll do is we'll end up with our bridge there up on the stilts, and we'll use 3 on this side and 3 on that side, and we'll leave the middle hole unfilled. And then when it comes to the tuners, we've decided to leave the extra tuner on at the other end, so we don't really have to. Does this actually zoom? Yeah, we'll leave the tuner on at the other end, the extra one, just so it doesn't end up with a hole in it and it kind of tells you something's been removed. So with a bit of luck, this thing should end up looking pretty cool. So the second one hasn't arrived yet. So the secret to this conversion is this bridge. It's not cheap. It's about 50 to 70 quid. Depends on where you buy them. It depends on what the market's like, but it can range between 55 to 70 quid each. And you get a little footing, a bushing to go into the guitar body. Now, sometimes, I don't know why it's not, but on some guitars, these little footings can actually go into the existing bushes. It's not going to be the issue here, because we're actually filling those holes, obviously, and re-drilling them. But sometimes, in the past, I've found with these Schaller bridges, on some things, you've got the original one in there like that, and these can sit quite nicely. And sometimes, I don't know why on this one, sometimes they even kind of sit and firmly, but this one this one feels a lot looser, so I wouldn't be trying that anyway. So we're going to fill those 2 original holes. Getting those out was quite a challenge, and what I did was I sort of built a pivot. I put some foam on here and some plywood on top of that, and I built myself a lever with a pivot point on the plywood, and so I was putting a fair bit of pivoting force onto the foam and then the plywood. Sorry, the plywood first, then the foam. Sorry, what would we call it? The fulcrum, yeah. Pressure on the fulcrum pressing on the plywood sitting on the foam. So nothing really was risking any damage to the finish, but it gave me a lot of levering motion, if you like. And I got a big screwdriver under there and just got it to come up. It might be probably as a tool for this kind of malarkey, but I can't remember what it is, and I certainly haven't bought one. So it's a matter of seeing first of all whether you've got any movement at all. This took a fair bit of leverage to get it out, because they were very snug fitting. If they were glued in the first place, that would be a much different proposition altogether. And actually, at the absolute outside, it may have been necessary to, we can't use these because obviously they're in the wrong place for this new bridge, so we may have had to drill those out altogether until we got rid of them, and then fill a larger area. As it is, these are 11mm holes, and I didn't have any 11mm dowel, nor did I have a dowel. I ordered some 12mm dowel so I could drill this out to 12 and plug it, but it never arrived. So in the end, I ended up making my own bits of dowel from what am I calling it? From a bit of ancient mahogany, vintage mahogany. And actually, the way I did it was I thought pretty nifty, and I've done it before this way several times. I'll just give you a quick sort of heads up on it. If you absolutely get stuck, and it means the difference between getting on with your job or just waiting for weeks for some bit of timber. You can get yourself a Dremel mandrel like this, and one of these is bent and one of them isn't, so I think that's okay. Then you drill a pilot hole in what begins as in this case, it was actually a 13mm plug that I cut with a plug cutter, but it was way too big. This has to be 11. So I drilled a little pilot hole, and then I put the mandrel into the chuck, held it tight, and I wound this on just carefully until it was firmly on, and also testing it so that it was seated centrally and it spun centrally. Then, when that was done, I find myself a bit of sandpaper. Alright, you can probably imagine what I'm going to say. I got myself a bit of actually loose sandpaper. Let's imagine it's this bit here. And here's a bit of idea, a bit of loose sandpaper, and I use this Merkur Hyamant stuff. And then you spin it on your Dremel, and you just touch this as if you were, wood turning. And you can touch different parts of it. You can touch a sort of a springy edge against it, and it takes off a nice little amount. So this was taken down to 11mm using that process, and this will sit in there. I don't want to push it in too hard, because what I really want to do is get some glue in there, and when I'm ready, I'm going to tap this thing in. Now, I'm sort of prepared. What I can't tell at this point, what I don't want is for it to fall all the way in and be loose. I would rather get it stuck some of the way down. Then I'm going to be left with a challenge of cutting it back flush with the top. That's going to be difficult, and it's going to depend on some chiseling and some careful blade work. If I sand this down too small, and even with using where's it gone? My measuring thing, my digital caliper. It's quite difficult to get it to an exact diameter all the way along. So if I go near the top, it's 1047. That's about right to go in there. Here it's 1107. So you can see that it's gonna sort of probably stick somewhere down there. I could put it, if I was just trying to be really careful, I could maybe I will do a little bit more turning until I'm confident, but I need it to go as far in as it'll possibly go. Truth is, I'm always going to get some amount of cut off unless I try. So I'll look at the depth of this with 25 mils. So this is barely 25 mils. If I got that the exact size, I might just be able to tap that all the way to almost flat. Of course, I want to tap the side of the end with the hole in first, so I need to know that if we say that, what would we say? 10.5 was a nice fit, I think it was, wasn't it? And this isn't even precisely round. We've got 11, we've got 10.6, we've got expands to 11, so it's slightly elliptical. Very difficult to get it perfect unless you're buying a dowel that's machine made. So, what I do know is that I can feel that if I tap this in with glue and I tap this in with glue, that one actually fits almost all the way in. That's probably just about right. If I was to sand this one, if I was to sand this one down a little bit more, maybe I'll comfortably get it to, that feels like it would go all the way in and stay there with a little tiny bit of glue. There's hardly any movement. That would be ideal. And then we'll still probably have to take a little bit off the top. So if I'm going to, while I'm here then, I'm going to take out get hold of my thing. Now I've lost the darned, the little metal jaw, C-shaped thing that opens and closes the chuck on this, which is really annoying. I also bought myself a little box spanner type of, actually a little spanner for doing up tuna nuts, and I've lost that immediately. So I've lost two of those really important little things, which is most annoying. So here we go, I'm going to put that into my chuck. Now I don't want it wobbling around in lots of different directions, so first of all I'm going to take that off, and then I'm going to, if I can, loosen the chuck and fit this all the way in. Now if that doesn't go all the way in, it might be telling me that I really want a different one, because I had two of these kicking about, and one may be straighter than the other. Actually, that one looks a bit bent too. Yeah. So this one's got a bit of I don't know what the word is. Actually, that's as far in as it will go. It's straighter than the other one, so I'll use that one. It just felt, ideally I wanted to go as far into the chuck as possible, but I think that's the limit. Okay, so now I've got to be careful. You don't want to split this wood, so you don't want to do it up too hard. It feels a bit like a cork at this point. I know it isn't, but so here we have it, and you see that? That's pretty straight. Now, what do we know about the one that fits in on the far side perfectly? We know that that's currently registering 1089 at the end, and it's registering 1104 at this end. This one's registering 1079 and 1121. So it's the base end, or the bottom end of this one that's 2. Hello? Hello?
I think they've blown the fuse on the power washer.
Oh, yes, do you want to see how it's going? Right, what am I looking? Getting my brains in gear. No, it's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. This is the right one. Ah, bugger. Yeah, that power washer does put a hell of a drain on it. Or has strain on it, I should say. It's like the lights dim when they fire that up. Right. So. Okie dokie. That's what we're saying. 11, 10, 6, and 11. Yeah, every time it goes on, everything dims for a split second. It's a big draw on the power.
Is that Wi-Fi working?
Yeah, yeah, thank you, yeah. 268.
Cheers.
Thanks. 1101, 1005. That's going down. Just try that here. It's all the way in. Okay. So that one feels like it will go in nicely. That one feels like it's a tiny bit bigger. Okay. The key thing about doing this is getting it to spin straight, because that way you'll get a fairly straight bit of sanding going on. It's very fine, but it is a bit like wood turning. You've just got to stick with it where you need to remove the material. And then to keep on either taking it off or just poking it down into the hole. There you go. That feels like it will go all the way in. Right. I can't really do much more shaping of that. I'm going to take that as read. Now, really, we just have to go with what we've got. That feels good. That feels good too. And we're going to get as tight a thing as possible. Now, let me just shut this door to make sure the heat stays in a bit. Okay. So, that was my the site manager, not the owner. I spoke to the owner just now, and amazingly got Wi-Fi. I need to have access to talk to Claire because of her treatment and stuff. So I just said, look, I tried to get independent, my own, what they call it, airband line of sight. I don't know what technology it is, but it's a line of sight radio frequency thing anyway. And they couldn't do it because they couldn't get line of sight. Right. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to need to fill this, but then we're going to need to position a new bridge. Now, the thing about positioning a new bridge, I've made myself a little tool here, better than one I had a couple of years ago. What I've done, one of the really difficult things about fitting tunematic bridges is if you get, first of all, if you get the position so much as a millimetre out, the alignment of the strings will be terrible, and that's just from side to side. And so with a tunematic bridge, because the tunematic bridge typically sits, well, until you've put it up on its stilts, it sits kind of below the pickups, and so it means that if you're trying to use two strings, which I usually do, to ensure the correct alignment to mark the position where it should stand, if you do that, the problem you've got is you have to kind of hold it and then somehow find a way to, how do you take this unit here? If you put it on the deck, that's great, but your strings will go up and over these pickups unless you remove them all, but then still go up over the edge of the guitar fingerboard here. So you won't ever get a straight line to guide you down the center. And so it's quite easy to go wrong with these types of bridges. They're very unforgiving about positioning. So I made another version of this, it didn't work so well, but this version has exactly 74mm gap between these two screw points. So what that means is, first and foremost, is, and I tested it, I'll give you an example. I tested it out, but you can place it down on something. So if, let's imagine we've got our strings on and we're moving it side to side, we've got our distance measured, our scale length, and now we're going to move from side to side with our 2E strings on, move it from side to side, and when we get it directly in place, now I can tap it down either end, and it's still, the strings are still high enough not to be trying to clamber over the pickups and the end of the fingerboard, and that means I can get an accurate placement or a mark. Now obviously what I'll do is I'll put a couple of layers of green tape down and I'll press the mark into that, and then we'll mark it with the pen. That will become the center holes of our new bridge saddles. But these bridge saddles are basically designed to sit into the body only that much. They're very small. You do need a larger hole or deeper hole than that, because if you think about it, when the bridge is all the way down, you can see that the screw sticks out a bit. So your hole needs to be, just guess it here, not accurate exactly, but it's going to need to be, I'd say, to have perfect clearance, 12 or 13 mils, just to be on the safe side. So we'll and it's only, by the way, it's actually 7 mil wide. The width of the piece that's going to go into the wood is actually, it's not that, it's actually just over 7 mil when this thing registers correctly. It's just over 7 mil. The problem with this is if you use a 6.5 millimeter drill, you'd really have to bang it hard to get it in. I don't like doing that. If you use a 7 mil drill, which I did in my test, then it sits in there comfortably, but if you turn the bridge upside down without the strings on, not only would the bridge fall off anyway, which it's meant to, but you get the feeling that these might drop out as well. So when the time is right, I'm going to put them in with a tiny bit of resin in there just to hold it. Now we could go wood glue as well. That might even be a better thing. Resin might be a little bit too much of a grip. We'll do wood glue in filling these holes too. Now the question I've got as well is we'll measure the scale length of this guitar and mark it on a piece of green tape down here once we've filled these holes. And so we're going to measure a line for the scale length. I haven't even measured what the scale length is on this, but we'll measure to the 12th fret and double it. We'll draw a line and then we'll mark up. And then the question or the decision we'll make is, if you notice the original bridge is tilted slightly, what I'll probably do is I'll draw a line and then I'll copy that line in tilt. So the chances are we'll be probably, there's no reason why we'll move anyway. The bridge is similar kind of dimensions, if I can find it. So they're not they're not entirely dissimilar. The shallow one is a little bit wider, but what it means is realistically these two are going to sit in a similar position. Now you can see straight away that won't be hard to gauge the angle, because you can pretty much, you've got enough movement in your saddles if you overcook the angle by a fraction that way, or if you undercooked it compared to the original that way, your saddles will allow you to adjust your way out of trouble. However, what you can see straight away is that even though this will be filled and a new one will be drilled, part of the original hole will be covered up with, whoops, stay there, with the bit that sticks out the side here like that, if you can see a little bit sticking out. So you'll see a little crescent of repair on either side, and there's no way around that. Now you can see that we've got a crimson, sort of vintage cherry and crimson type of finish on this quilted top, and clear finish on top of that. It would be very, very difficult. It would be impossible to replicate that, because first of all we'd have to have some kind of quilted maple or veneer, and then we'd have to get the stains right, and then we'd have to kind of spray out, and then you'd see the join of the finish unless you redid the whole area. So to be honest with these things, this is not that kind of project. Pete and before him Vince and Big Steve, probably Big Vince too, they all wanted guitars they could just get on and play, and I think we just have to accept that this difference between having a conversion like this plus a reloved setup, and that includes a new custom cut Tusq nut already marked up, ready to go, by the way, and a full setup, fret leveling and everything. There's a difference between that price and stripping everything out, filling this, trying to find a matching quilt, maple and all that, and trying to refinish this top in some sort of gloss poly. I mean, that's just a huge job. So I think we're not in that league, and we're going to do the easier of the two ways. And I think we'll be pleasantly surprised that this will come in a smaller, less ugly repair or a less ugly cover up than you think. What we do have, I do have some cherry nitro. I've actually also got some cherry waterborne, which we could have a go at colouring it with, or we could colour it with some stain first, then we can add some waterborne cherry, or we could stain the new wood, which is mahogany, kind of dark. It'll look pretty dark anyway once we've got some finish on it, and then we can make it look a bit more in keeping with that colour. I don't think it would be difficult to do that, but we're not going for a professional refinish. So as you can see, our new bridge will sit down, that sounds like somewhere in Wales, where I used to live. New bridge, it'll sit there like that, obviously up high, and we will direct 6 strings from this cluster here over. Now, they will only be as wide as that bridge can possibly go, and so they will look as they look, because this neck up here, but on a 7-string, it is technically a little bit too wide. Nice inlays, don't you think? Technically a fraction too wide for a 6-string, but it's better for somebody who hasn't been able to play at all to be able to get on and have a bit of a play. So one of the things let's do one thing at a time, hey? Let us commit ourselves to filling these posts. Now, one of the things about this guitar, and I struggle to see it on this one, is typically, maybe it's hard to see, typically on a tunematic bridge there tends to be, or there is, an earth wire that grounds the bridge, and in this case, or in most cases, the earth wire from inside, or a common earth inside the pocket, goes to goes through a hole inside of one of these holes and sits out here and contacts the new bridge, or the bridge that you put in. All right? And that metal to metal contact grounds your bridge. Problem with that is whatever's in there now we're going to cover up, so we're going to have to somehow make another one. And the problem is going from where we are currently and sort of knowing, first of all, when we drill a hole just for this little device here, if I can see it, that little bushing there, is now much smaller, and do we have enough room to drill through its sidewall and end up in the pocket, the cavity I should say. So I think what I'll probably have to do is I'll probably have to make a transparency template of this to see where it falls on the front, to be as close as I can, and then to get a sense of where, once I've filled and we've re-drilled, get a sense of how we're going to make that ground connection to the bridge. I can't see any other way that this thing has a ground connection. Sometimes you could ground, if you could ground these, or something grounded these, but I can't see where that would ground either, because the line of the cavity sort of goes about there. So it's going to go, typically it's going to go through there in a straight line into the cavity. Funnily enough, I actually can't see where it comes in from there. We've got a battery compartment here, which has a Duracell battery in it. Ta-da! There it is. And the two wires are there, the live and the red and the black come out of there. So somewhere, if I can close that please, somewhere a bridge earth should come out into the pocket and be grounded, but I can't see it. Now the only other possibility is that it's in there and it goes through into a common ground in here. And the only way I'd know that is to take up the EMG pickup. So just so I know a bit more about what I'm dealing with, let's take that up. Now while I'm doing that, I'm going to place this thing body down. I know actually it's probably a better view anyway, standing up. Right, so I don't quite know how this little creature is attached, so I don't want anything to kind of go springing anywhere. Not the best screwdriver, so I'm going to go with, if I can, with one of my newer bits. See what we've got in there. That's too big. I bought a whole set of Draper. Not the greatest quality in the world, but I bought a set of new ones because my bits were getting tired. Matron. Now I can't see quite into this. Quite long screws. Okay, so let's have a little look. I'm just doing this only to see if it will tell us where the bridge ground is or should be. If I can't find it, it's not the end of the world, because we still then have the challenge to put a new one in, and we'll do that by going through the side of the new hole. Now this is interesting. This actually doesn't appear to show a bridge earth coming in through here, which sometimes is the case. So we just have to accept that we don't know where there is one right now. So I'm going to try and just gently do this back up. I'm pressing down on the foam to help it sit down where we want it. Okay, so that's not visible through there, and to be honest, I can't actually see a piece of metal sticking through here anywhere that is grounding the bridge. So could it be that the bridge isn't grounded? Do you know what? According to these wires, it isn't. And that would be an interesting thing, and I don't quite know what justification that would have for not being grounded. But we'll not accept that's going to be the way it is. We're going to end up grounding it again if we can. I mean, again, it really does depend on if we can get a drill through into the cavity so we can feed a piece of wire in that will contact one of these bridges, one of these studs, and you can see they're tiny, so that contact is going to have to be pretty good. It's going to have to be near the top of the hole, which is good because we won't be able to get any further in. Right, enough talk. Let's get the glue. Let's get the scary thing done. Ooh, let's get a little fretting hammer. Let's get the glue. Let's put this like that, a bit flatter but still supported. There's our what's-its. You can see them. Going to get me a little cocktail stick. Now with this tapping in, really, when I come to tap them in, I'm going to move the body around so it's flat on the ground. I'm just going to use this as is for the time being. I often use these old post-it notes as my palette for glooping out some glue. Okay, here we go. Brains, we're going to fill. We're going to fill. We got the dowels all good. We're going to fill. I've done another little thing on the dowels that you may not have seen before. I put a groove down the side of the dowels, and this is so that if we trap air or even glue as to push the dowel in, what we don't want is a sort of pneumatic effect with air being compressed at the bottom of the tunnel with nowhere to go, because what that will do is it'll actually make the dowel bounce out practically. It will not be able to overcome the pneumatic resistance. Okay, if we want to be absolutely sure, we can take our, let me show you by the way. There's the groove down the side there. Anyway, so we can take our thingy, dowel, and we can also roll it a little bit in a little bit of glue. Now remember, I'm not having to worry about the, I'm not going to worry about the wire at this point. Right? I'm filling some wood, that's all I'm doing. When we re-drill the next holes in the correct location, that's when we'll concentrate on the grounding. So now I'm flat on the deck and I'm doing a little bit of a tapping. Now what's interesting is because of how they drilled the top end of this this hole, there's a kind of gap because they've done a little countersink. Now we can't do anything with that other than potentially maybe fill it, if we really feel like it, with some resin when the glue is dry, just to kind of level it off. There's a little bit of wood, when this is dry, there's a little bit of wood to chisel off, and we're going to have to mask and tape off so that we can use the chisel. I'm going to try and use blades, very sharp blades as well, to get this flush. Now, truth to tell, it doesn't absolutely depend on being flush, because with our new hole that we drill into it, we're probably going to it could sit on top of that, because we know our bridge has got to sit pretty high, but it's just easier if it's flush. So like I say, you can see that these bits of wood, no matter how cleverly we cut them, we couldn't cut them to fill this hole precisely, because it's not made like that. They've cut a little countersink. Now I'm going to just tap this one, and in the same vein, this one is actually a little bit of a better fit. Now if you get to a point where you're worried about striking the top of the, whatchamacallit, that thing, you can find any number of tools, bits and bobs that you can use to help you. So this way I'm going to use one of these plug cutters, and I'm just using it on top as a way of tapping in that bit of mahogany without it touching the body of the guitar. And wood glue is great. You can just wipe it away, any excess, and it cleans up really quickly. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, those are now filled for the time being, and really we don't want to do anything else much with them until we have got the glue is dried, which means we're going to take a sort of break. But what we can do in the meantime is we can fit the nut at the other end, and then we'll kind of go off camera, because really the next most critical bit will be looking to see if we can tidy up that, and we want to get that looking as disguised as possible before we go and put the next one in, not least because our 74 degree spread is going to fall almost exactly on the edge of these things, so we really need them to be as solidly in as possible before we go in and drill out some new material, which is going to come out of these, mostly out of these mahogany pieces. The only other way of doing this would be to go considerably larger with a hardwood, much bigger hardwood dowel, but I'm sort of trying to weigh off a larger footprint where you can put a new hole in. It's kind of desirable because you're going into fresh timber, you're not sitting on the edge of a bit of timber. On the other hand, it's not desirable because it's far more visible a repair. So it's a kind of, it's a toss-up all the way. And I think that once this is set, and maybe we've put a little bit of resin on top to really finish the sort of fill and hold in place, then I suspect that what we'll find is that opting for the smaller repair is probably going to be the best the best of the outcomes. Now what I'm going to do, we're going to need to do some marking up of distances in a minute, so we can prepare for that with this great wonderful frog tape. Now I'm overrunning this by miles because the truth is I know our line isn't going to be there. It's going to be somewhere through these whatchamacallits, these existing holes, but I'm kind of putting this down here because I just want to give as much cover and protection as I can for the surrounding material. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling it to the very edge of that, or just the outside edge of the, what I call the countersink. Sorry, it's not, there's close-ups and there are close-ups, and this isn't a very good one. So I'm just I'm going to the edge of that. Now that of course leaves me with little corners which I'll try and also fill up so that we go around in little segments so that we get as much of this cleared up as possible. That will also help when I've knifed these back. It'll help me to be able to put some resin on there, and if it spills over it will go onto the green tape, frog tape. This stuff is great. It's expensive, but I could scarcely live without it. So now I'm going tangent diagonals across the corners with square edge bits of green frog tape, and again just getting as close to, I could cut this with the blade, but I'm sort of doing it in not a hurry exactly, but I'm doing it in the low-tech way. So yeah, my landlord very kindly agreed for me to access their Wi-Fi, not really for any other purpose than being able to contact Claire when she needs me if her health isn't good. And it sounds really crazy, but I couldn't do any work this weekend because she went into hospital with a high fever, and so they called her in, what with her immune system being the way it is and the chemo, they wanted her on site in a ward. So they took her in, and that was Friday night about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then all through Saturday I was at home, and I had to be at home because there was no internet connectivity, no mobile signal, and no landline. So the minute that they released her and said she could come home, I wasn't available to pick up the message, which wasn't great. So I came up today. She's home now. I picked her up last night, and I came up today and asked Roger if he minded whether I could please find just log into the Wi-Fi enough to just take messages in case she needs me, and he was absolutely fine with that. So now I've got a kind of a hotline to my occasionally poorly wife, and if she needs me to run her to the hospital for a checkup or something, you can see I'm just taking little thin bits off this, and we absolutely can do that same thing down to the surface, pretty flat. To do this, you have to have an absolutely razor sharp blade, and you have to be quite comfortable handling it. And I put a curve on it, as you can see, so I can cut into the bit I want to remove, but avoid digging further down into any surrounding finish. It's a hard, a difficult task. It would be lovely if you could just get a sanding block on there and go, right, nice and flush, job done. But I'm really, I'm working with a handheld blade with a curve on it just to get in there and level this off. But getting a bulk of this off now gets us closer to where I want to be. And I say it doesn't absolutely have to be flush. It just needs to be low enough so that it doesn't really affect the seating of the new bridge. And I think we can pretty much get there. It's good to, if you can get to the same piece from other angles, you get a better shot at flattening it off. But unfortunately, pickups and the knobs and stuff sort of get in the way of me doing that. So for now I'm getting sort of as low as I can. I really do now need to park it. I'll put this blade off to one side and we'll come back to that. Put the glue out of the way. Okay, so the next bit will be the nut, and I don't have an anchor point for the camera at that end, so it's not brilliant. Theoretically, if I had some clampy thing, I could possibly. I'd have to build something off the end of there if I was really going to make it hold on. Could I do it? Let me try. Yes, no, wait a minute. I'm just looking, thinking I've got the charger plugged into that. Well, holy cow! This is the magic arm. Well, you know, you could do this, and just to keep on going, we've got the Sony Action Cam, so I could just go in. I mean, you know, zooms are never great, but there we are. Look, here's me working on the nut. Okay, so for this guitar, it's vital. Not only have we changed the bridge with one of those brilliant Schaller bridges, this job depends on us replacing the nut, and thankfully Tusq makes a black blank, which is the same good PTFE based Tusq material, so it's great for tuning stability and low friction, and it happens to be exactly the size of the original nut on this Hellraiser. Well, I don't know about the depth, it's a little bit shallower depth wise, but it's exactly the same width. So for this I'll take off the that thing. You know what it is, the thing. First rod cover, and then I'm going to find my way to my favourite nut dispatcher. When you're knocking off, do you know what? I'm sorry about this. I should be doing this in bright light. I'm an idiot. Yeah, when you're about to knock off a nut, just check and see how it's attached. See where there is or are any build-ups of finish. Sometimes finish builds up like a kind of like a sand on a beach up against a sea wall, kind of. And if you hit it too hard or you yank it off too much, you'll take some of the finish with you. So this isn't lacquered over, it's glued in place. So I'm going to begin with giving it a little a gentle tap to try do the operative word. Yeah, got it loose, break the glue seal and see where now it's sticking or attached. And it has got a glue, there's a kind of bead of glue that's come out from underneath it, which is going to need to snap off for us to get in there. So we can help it a little bit with the trusty blade, the snap on, snap off, snap on, snap off blade. Now I'm just going to sort of hit myself in the face. What I'm doing there is I'm running down the front of the nut and I'm just chipping off what is obviously super glue residue from the first fitting of this nut, and that may be enough just to stop it kind of peeling off a chunk when I take this nut right off. Yeah, it's kind of wobbling. It's still quite glued on the front edge. Now then I go 45 degrees right into the corner of this the bead, if you like, where the nut joins, and just run my blade down there, and that should loosen it a little bit more. And you can see now even with your close-ups, it's now becoming loose. And again, I'll go in with controlled use of the blade, and there you go, I can hear it cutting the gritty super glue. And it's got so much glue on the bottom of it, it's taken up a little bit on the underside. That's not the end of the world. We can tidy that up with a couple of different tools. We've got a chisel if we need to. We've got the faithful snap-on, snap-off blade, which does a nice little number of scraping back a surface until it's nice and smooth. While I'm here, I can sort of scrape the same blade down the clean or the clear edge of this fingerboard, remove any build-up of glue there. And then we've got a Hosco kind of nut file. This is kind of thin, designed ultimately for strats and tellies, but it's not a bad little device for, you can, as long as you can keep it under control, you can run it backwards and forwards as well on a Les Paul style nut shelf like this. So really the objective now with the nut off, you can see actually from before where it's all underneath the truss rod cover, but you can see where the glue is kind of run down and caught. So they put it on quite wet and then put the thing on and pushed it out of the production line. So here's our replacement. It's thinner. So the first thing we're going to notice is that it's thinner, it's taller at the moment, but that's okay, we'll bring it down. There's a couple of ways we can do this. I would suggest that we probably don't try and do anything other than get it to seat nicely to begin with. Do some measuring, we want the platform it sits on to be as flat and as level as possible. Then we'll shave from the underside of the Tusq nut to bring it down to as close to the required height as we want. Then I would suggest we glue it in, and then the gap caused by the fact that this is a thinner nut in this dimension, I think we should fill with a little bit of heritage cherry just to cover up the plain wood. And actually partly the Hellraiser thing cover will hide most of that. It'll just be the either side, that a bit of cherry nitro probably will be a good touch. So my first concern will be to keep on working that slot flat. Now I've got a very fine slot chisel, and this is one of those things that only use if you're very comfortable with it, because what you've got here is you've got some very hard, brittle kind of plastic, which is the binding, joining some very fibrous soft wood, relatively soft wood by comparison, which is the underlying wood of the neck. And those two things, because they're different materials, they all want to behave differently. So what you really want is to be working something like this. It's better to get a flat edge by wearing it away with a very dependable flat file than to be running the risk of chiseling two different. If it was one single, if it didn't have the binding on it and it was all one material, I would feel much more confident using the chisel to gently cut my way to a level shelf. But because of the difference in the materials, there's a great risk of digging into one and not cutting the other as much, and so on. So we don't really care what it looks like. What we care about is that we get to a place where it sits really smooth, really square and comfortably up against the end of the fingerboard. And at this point in time, it's still a little bit rocky. Having said that, if we put in quite a bit of glue, that would stay in place and do the job. I don't know what this material is. It may be quite a nice Tusky sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised. This is not a cheap guitar. However, we can't do anything with it because it's well, you know what? Let me think about this. It's interesting. I was going to say we can't do anything about it. No, we can't. It's too narrow. Of course we can't. I was going to say we could make an adjustable nut, but we can't make an adjustable nut without the base cradle, and we can't make one for this size. So anyway, so we don't have any choice. We have to get this flat, and that's going to take a little bit of time. And you know, we'll rely on the flat, square-edged tools that we've paid good money for. I think this Hosco fret slot file is about 25, something like that, 20 quid's worth. So it's not cheap, but it is what it is. And I can see that it is slowly just taking away the hard lacquer meets binding, which is much harder than the softer shredded wood, some of which, as you saw, came away with the underside, which is perfectly natural, by the way, for a glued nut. It almost always does something like that. Again, once you start to get closer, you can help things on their way with using the edge of a blade, which is also very straight and flat. Although it can curve a little bit, it's still very good for scraping down any excess plasticness to a point where you start to feel whether the nut fits better, and that's not far off. Interestingly, if I were to take this off here, and let's go back to naught zooms, let's take you in for a close-up look. Let's hope there's power enough to do it. Yeah, so you can see what I've got. I've got a thinner nut than before. This is deeper, but of course it's got 7 slots, so we can't use that. Technically, if that was actually way too high, we could build that up and we could reuse this nut. We could put a boot on it. We could raise it so high that we can get rid of all of those slots to a flat surface, cut our new 6-wide-6 using our slot calculator, and actually get away with using this and its full depth. But you know what, once this is on, and as I said, the amount of empty wood space because of the slightly shallower nut, by the time we've got ourselves a Hellraiser thingy on there, it's going to stick out a tiny little bit, but providing all of that across there is a bit of cherry finish, it'll hardly be noticeable. And we've got our new cut string slots, and it's absolutely exactly the right width across there, which is amazing. Interestingly too, if you've ever seen a Gordon Smith guitar, they tend to use a nut shaped very much like this, and they will have it on the end of their neck, and it'll be brass, the nut, and they will screw it in directly into the fingerboard end using 2 little screws, and that's actually a really nice thing. We could even do that here instead of using glue. That would be, why would that be so good? Because it would come out next time without doing any harm to the slot. But you know what? That's a step too far. It's kind of nice. Oh, it's a tribute, a nod to Gordon Smith. Oh, I quite like it. Look at these inlays. Aren't these things beautiful? I mean, this is a premium guitar. They're dirty, so you can't even really see how beautiful until we get to here. Look at that. I mean, this is like being in a medieval church. I mean, really, isn't that absolutely gorgeous? In the olden days, when I used to like to partake of the Jamaican cauliflower, I could have stared at this for hours. I still can, with or without the weed. Anyway, look at that. I mean, that is a beautiful inlay. I mean, imagine trying to do that by hand. That would not be possible. Anyhow, so you can see we're kind of on the way there. Our blank Tusq nut, our new, I've already cut in the first marks of the slots here. What we'll probably end up doing is we'll cut it down to as close to the right height to begin with, but we will end up cutting in to the correct first fret action, and in doing so we're going to need to probably shape down this nut anyway manually. What do you reckon? Do you think we should put 2 little screws in there? That would be a kind of distinctive little thing. This has to sit there because of that hole, and therefore we do get that little bit of space. The only way around that is to fill that hole and re-drill. I mean, that's entirely possible. Put a little piece of dowel and toothpick in there, and then we can actually push. Sorry, I'm not very good with this camera. Push that up against there. What do you say? Should we do that as well? Let's do it. Nobody cares about that. It's there to be filled. Okay, so I'm going to go off camera in a minute. I'm going to make a cup of tea. But while the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to spend some time just working with this Hosco. Give you a quick close up. This Hosco something F slot frets 3. I don't know. Slot file. Telecaster slot file 3. I guess it's telling me it's 3mm. You can see how. Look at it, will you? You can see how cool that little thing is, and I'm just going to continue to work it down. We've got plenty of downward room, so we're not in any worry about going down too far. I'm just going to run this backwards and forwards off camera while I'm having a cup of tea to get it as flat as we can, so that when I put this little thing on here, there's none of that, and it's nice and solid, matching the underside of that. Okay, so I shall see you when that's done. Right, well, here we are. Plugs are in, setting. I'm not going to do too much to them. Certainly not going to drill them just yet. They need really 24 hours. I mean, we can drill them before that, but I wouldn't want to put the studs in. Anyway, so that's at that end. I've been looking closely and thinking, I've put a little bit of stain on here just as a kind of squint look. Obviously it looks odd surrounded by green tape, but I have a feeling that because I'm not going to end up doing, you could do this is a poly finish, so you could try and do a poly finish on top of here and hope to end up with a smooth thing that you could buff out, but it would never be that good. So I'm thinking really just more to disguise these final crescent things that we're going to be left looking at. Excuse me. Down here like that, tiny little overhang. In fact, it's not even going to be that much because it'll be covered by this little footing here. But I have a feeling that while I've got it taped up here, I may just get a tiny little brush and I may run some Heritage Cherry Nitro into those little gaps, the little sort of cup bit at the top, or the countersink bit at the top. So to that end, I have some pretty ancient, wow, Heritage Cherry. Now I can use it in that sort of consistency, or I can add some cellulose thinners to it, which I have. Now down at the other end, while we were not looking, I messed up one nut, which isn't a bad thing. I was trying to cut it, and if the underlying thingy, that shelf isn't brilliant, then sometimes you can go chasing a flat surface and end up overcutting it. I've basically salvaged it, and it's over there somewhere, and I'll be able to get a new nut out of it for the next one. But I switched to the other one that I bought, which is also prepped and slotted ready to go. And what I did, as you can probably see, no, you can't see really, it's just you can see I did 2 screws in the end, like a Martin, oh heck, what's that called? Gordon Smith. Anyway, it's not very good at view, but you maybe see better from there. Yeah, look at that. So this isn't even glued on at the moment, and I actually quite like it the way it is. I don't think we'll get any glue in there, but we will put some of that Heritage Cherry in there too. All right, I'll take this back off. This is the new position, so it goes, as you can see, it goes pretty much up close to there. Could do with a little further screw down, but so that was a little bit off camera while I was thinking of things. And when this is dry, as I say, I will start touching up. In fact, it's pretty dry now, but I'll get myself prepared with the Heritage Cherry. And sorry about the noise. What I'll do is I shall something like that. I shall find my cellulose thinners for the moment and see whether we need to add some to the entire little pot. So, by the way, to get into the nut with screws, I had to take 2 of the tuners off, which I'll put back on in a minute. Right, let's just move that out of the way. Okay, now this is potentially very messy little arrangement because this stuff can get everywhere. So I'm just going to have me some wipe up cloths ready. I'll put this on here first. And what's the mucky bit? It's this I don't know what you call it, brush. The brush is a very generous name. So this is very thick stuff. Really, we don't want it to be this thick. We'd probably actually seat it there like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of thinners to this, and I'm going to do a bit of stirring first. Now that's a guesstimate, and I'm going to use one of the little sticks to try and blend it in. It'll take quite a while probably to stir it all up. So, what you can see there, no, not much. So we can end up with whatever consistency we want, but you can see this is a little bit too thick for anyone. You couldn't really brush this on. You could gloop it on, but then you end up with quite a proud sort of lump of stuff setting, and that will take an overnight set. So I think you can see that's probably still a bit too much. I mean, it probably would go into that crack quite nicely in a funny sort of way, but I'm not quite sure it's quite the consistency I want just yet. I mean, it's beautiful stuff. It smells too. Obviously, nitro cellulose. Okay, I think that will do for the thinners. Okay. After this job, I think I will get on with my refilming of a section of my ebook, how to design a headstock, a 3-a-side headstock with the shortest possible headstock and the least possible sideways pull of the strings. It's an interesting little part of the ebook where, when you make a custom headstock, there are so many temptations to do cutesy things with your design, but the reality is there are only 1 or 2 realistic permutations that allow you to really make a headstock that doesn't make the strings go through at funny angles. And of course, if they go through at funny angles, it has quite a significant impact on the tuning. Okay, so I've got a little tray here with a little top here with some dust, lovely dust, and some purple. That stuff is called acrylic. And who knows, that might even make a nice mix, but it's well dried. This could actually undry it for all I know. So I'm putting a little bit in here, letting it slide off, and I'm going to get a toothpick. I'm going to apply it into the little cracks of the toothpick, and I'm going to put on my zoom specs in order to do it, which are probably covered in dust. So that gives me a blob of stuff to work with. Ooh, can you see? Hey, you can see me. You can see me. So let's see if I give me a sharp end. This is garbage. I've got the rubbishest toothpicks known to mankind, personkind. These were really substandard, I tell you. So let's see if I can get me a blob with this and get it sit into the hole. I think I need it more on a slope, so I'm going to have to be a bit more generous with it. Okay, then slide down to the side, then we'll get little blobs and we'll try and get them. We'll go off the top of the plug and then down the side, hopefully, and hopefully fill in. It's quite a nice dark colour actually, this heritage cherry. So I think it will do the job quite well. As it dries, it tends to shrink, and so you get a bit of a concavity forming, but we can add a bit more to it after that to fill that bit out again. And if there's any that's really proud of the surface here that I'm building up at the moment, then we can scrape that off as well. So I'm concentrating more on the gaps down the side of here to sort of just fill those out. And once they're filled out, I'll probably add some to the top to just cover it, but I could do that with a little brush. I do have a little brush which I'll use for this. Again, I have to be cleaned off afterwards. That's okay. This is just covering over the plug of timber a little bit. It's quite nice. So you see that it's, it's dark and it's kind of in keeping colour-wise, and we're filling the little gaps up, which is good. Rolling it off the edge of the dowel mahogany, vintage mahogany, recycled mahogany dowel from an old table from someone's home sometime in the clearance, I think. So this week, even though I couldn't get into the workshop, I sold a guitar. Last week I sold a guitar, a week or 10 days ago I sold a guitar to a gentleman up in the, where are those places? The Western Isles of Scotland. And I sold another ash Strat to a customer in Birmingham, I think it was, somewhere in or near Birmingham. Which I'm waiting for another pickup for, so there'll be an pickup upgrade as well, and it'd be a nice opportunity to give it a once over, a refresh, a kind of check over, and a sort of reset up, which is after a while being on the peg is always a good thing to do. Okay, well, you know, when you look at that, how well you can see it, yeah, not bad. That actually isn't too far off the colour we want, so I'm kind of happy with how that's going. What I think I'll do is I'll try and clean up my various tools for the minute, and let this first kind of lot. Now I'm just looking around, it fills the edges very nicely, so I'll sort of try and clean up, and we'll seal this up and come back to another layer of this, and we'll sort of write off some of these things as just too dirty, too filthy to continue with, including this. We'll put this in a little bit of a little container somewhere in a minute to clean it off, but we'll come back to our vintage cherry. Oh look, another top. Now this had looks like true oil in it, which is gone all solid, which is fine. But just for the purposes of cleaning, what I'm going to do is put a little bit of thinners in here, just to clean that brush up a tiny fraction. Now, some people will say, oh look, you're putting nitrocellulose on top of poly, and that's quite common. So people have done that throughout guitar making history. It's not a problem. Apparently Fender used to do it all the time. When they would finish their guitars in poly, and then they would they'd put a decal on it, and then they would spray over the top of that in nitro. I think because it was quite easy to use, and just made it a simple job. Keep these two little bits, and I'll put this out of the way somewhere safe, and bin everything else. Brush ready to use, fingers clean, not to go anywhere else. That elsewhere. Right, okay. So I think for the time being, I'm going to put this on hold and leave this up here to set. I haven't got, I'll put the tuners back on. This one's just bubbling ever so slightly, so I want to make sure that whatever air bubbles coming up here, we just stop it. Because it's quite a sticky finish. It's gonna, if there is air trapped in there, it's quite possible for it to build up underneath and form a sort of stiff bubble of something. Okay, so it's not perfectly smooth, but really I'm not so much worried about that. I just want the colour right, so that it's as inconspicuous as possible. Like I say, the nut is in, oh damn, look at this, I forgot. I'm going to put a bit up here along the edge of our nut now. I'm going to leave the nut in place because it's pretty much where I want it to be. Now I've just gone and put all this stuff away, which wasn't a brilliantly smart move, so I'm going to have to use yet another one of these little tops if I'm going to use this. So I'm going to now use the brush part to dribble some paint into there, enough to tip the container sideways and hopefully access it with this thing. And now I'm going to, what you can see down there, yeah, sort of, I'm going to, hello, I'm going to just put it, get it alongside this edge of the finish up here. So it's quite a tricky thing, just get it into there. It's very difficult to do it without it touching the nut. And actually I don't really mind if it does touch the nut because it will sink down into the groove and settle. Really I'm just interested more in filling, just covering up the bare wood. And quite cool if the bit of the finish goes on the nut edge because it's staying put where it is, it's nice and firm. We won't want to be removing it for any reason. And I'm doing the same at this end here. But yeah, you really not much chance of getting it in there without touching the Tusq. But again, it's not at all a problem. It's where it is. And we're just trying to get the finish into that slot. Yeah, you know, that's pretty well hidden. I could take the nut out and do this, but what would happen is it would all probably just disappear underneath the nut and we'd end up with a load of it sticking to the bottom of the nut. Okay, so then when it comes around to it, we'll later on have this back on, and I think that would be pretty cool. I'll leave this here like that, and we'll probably use a little bit more and might well come along a little bit later and put some more on both these bits. Yeah, that's all right, that. Okay, what I think I'll do is I'll stop here. I'll carry on doing these little bits off camera. I'll put the tuners back on. When I'm happy with the finish on there, and I'm happy with the finish up there, and I'm ready to basically we'll be ready to position, mark up and position the new bridge, and that's going to be a really interesting task because we're going to need to get that exactly 74mm, but we're going to need to have some strings mounted on here to be able to move it from side to side until we get it exactly in the right place. We could take it off, you know, these points here. We could sort of try and aim to the middle of those and then a few millimeters that way. I always am more comfortable if I reset using the strings as my guide, and we can let's have a look. How can we get some? We can probably get some through here. I think we should be all right. We'll attach a couple of strings through here, and they'll come off the top here. Something like that. Yeah, bit messy aroundy, but yeah, we'll get it all positioned, and then we'll mark the new points. As I say, they're going to be almost exactly on the boundary between these fills and the boundary between the fresh wood and the filled plugs. That means you can then imagine the crescent of leftover fill that we're going to be able to see from the side here. This one's interesting. This is bubbled up, and what it's done is it's given me, it's got a little bit of white dust caught in it or something. Or is that, no, you know what that is? That's just a reflection. Let's see if I can add a little bit more. When you put nitro on top of nitro, the new nitro effectively melts the old nitro and bonds with it because it's got the solvents in it. So hopefully we'll just build that up a little bit. I don't mind if it goes, sets a little bit proud of the surface, because That means I can always gently scrape that back. So a bit more rather than less is good on this. But bearing in mind that it will shrink as it dries. So what looks like a great big donut of Heritage Cherry Nitro will end up being much flatter. And what I'll do is I'll get the brush again into the middle of these fills and we'll just thin this out and paint over the top. It's looking very sticky, this stuff now. It goes off in the air quite quickly. I probably need a bit of fresh sticky paint. If I'm to use the paintbrush again, well actually we've got a bit of left over here. Let's chuck a bit of that in. Let's do use a bit of thinners here. And I'm going to sound like Bob Ross any minute now. Yes, use a bit of thinners here. Okay, and that helps us to thin out everything to the centre of our plug. Yeah, I think that's about good. Yeah, got it down to a sort of consistency that it will settle fairly well. And I'm going to go, there's not enough actual thick paint on there, so I'm going to go and get a bit more out of the paint pot, which I can't remember where I've put it now. It's there. So let's tip away a bit of this heavily thinned stuff, because we don't want too much of that spoiling things. Now the base end, body end of things at the moment is tilting now. I can see it running a little bit towards the back end, so I'm going to flatten that out for the period while this dries, because I want it to be as level as possible. Okay. Right, thicken this up a bit. Could even have mixed some black in with this to hide this a bit better, but or to blend it in a little better. Just painting this as well as I can into the gap. Okay, now this bit, just running across the binding, so I'm just going to sort of cut that back a bit with my bare brush. It's sitting out too far over the binding. Okie dokie, paint out of the way. That bit, very flat. There's still a little tiny bubble in the corner there. I'm just going to have to lift that. Right. Okay. Oh, sorry, that was a really rubbishy picture, was it not? So let's have a quick close up. As you can see, hello, come in. Now at the moment it looks very dark, but as it thins out or dries out, it will thin and it'll look okay. Right. Not quite sure how the green tape, the frog tape, is going to lift up off that, but we shall see a bit later. So I'll leave that to dry, and there's our stuff into the crack there, which will eventually have the Hellraiser kind of sitting up there like that. In fact, we can just leave it there like that. Okay. Yeah, and that goes up a bit onto the plastic, onto the Tusq, but you'd never really notice. So that's it for now. See you in a little while. Okay, just coming back in on this one. I wasn't intending to go any further on this one, but I did, and I'm sorry, I did it off camera, which was a bit naughty because I was listening to the radio. Anyway, there are the two new holes drilled in, and one of the things that there's been a challenge all this way is to figure out how to get an earth wire into that, the new, what do they call them, holes, right? So what I've decided is rather than trying to go from here through into here, which is the cavity, which I don't have any room to get an angle on that hole to go in. In other words, I could only go in at a certain steepness, which would probably not get through, or would get stuck in the body of the wood. I decided to take the pickup out for the time being and go in at a shallower angle because of this big wide gap. I could get in shallower, right, and go in and come through the wall of here. And that means I can get the metal wire into there, out through here and back into the cavity this way. And that is how I'm going to get I'm going to get me a ground wire. Now the funny part is of all of this is I cannot for the life of me see how the previous setup had a ground wire. I'm just trying to wiggle this ground wire out, and I'm sort of holding on with no hands. Right, that's fine. Now I'm going to strip that back to a bare bit of wire like this end, and I'm going to get it to sit in with this post when I get it in. But I'm also going to have to part resin this post to get them to stay in, because they're only barely, they're okay, but they're not the tightest things in the world, because the difference between the 7mm and 7.2mm is not really great enough, and a 6.5, the only other drill bit available, is too small, and you'd end up having to hit it too hard. So this will go with a bit of resin, but I just need the resin on this one to hold it, a bit more resin on that one, and I need this bare metal here to be pulled down and to sit underneath this. Now the funny part, of course, is I really need to sand this bushing as well, because otherwise it's got paint on it and it might not make the electrical contact. So that's a little bit of extra thing. And then I'll poke this wire through here into the cavity underneath the pickup, and then I'll put the pickup back in. Oh my goodness. So I thought that would be interesting. Anyway, this worked really fine, my positioner device. We've got it right in the right position. I haven't obviously got it in yet to just test it out, but I'll get that done, and then the nut is on there tidy on a Friday. I'm going to then put some strings on and cut this down. Of course, the thing I didn't even know about this guitar, and why would I? I'm not a 7-string person. I didn't realize the scale length on this guitar was 674, which is 26 inches or something. So it's a longer scale length than other guitars. So it's gonna make the strings feel the strings are going to feel stiffer because they're going to be tension tighter. I think I'll probably tomorrow, when that's fully dried, I might put a little bit more on there just to kind of fill it out. But it's, overall, once it's covered with the bridge, which will sit kind of like this and cover most of it up, you'll hardly notice. But I think I'm gonna call it quits there for today. I'm pleased with where I've got to, and I'm going to go and take a couple of hours off and come back up. I'll finish this off tomorrow, and of course I'll tidy up because it's a bit of a mess in here at the moment. So see you again tomorrow. Welcome back to the 7-string to 6-string conversion, and I've got a different camera angle here. Downwards from the Sony if we need it, and crosswards from the Huawei. More feedback from people saying, I've had enough of that bendy Sony camera look view, and I totally get it. I think what this year's going to bring is, come on you go, would you please? Oh, would you please? I think what this year's going to bring is probably the upgrade to I think an iPhone, probably iPhone 12. Not because I'm a particular fan, and in fact I'm quite happy with my Huawei Chinese phone for for all the good that it does me as a phone, because I can't get any signal anywhere down here. But as a sort of computer in your pocket, it's perfectly good. But I've had some very helpful feedback from people in the know who have said that their iPhone 12s are replacing, or they've used them, they have replaced their sort of standard old-fashioned cameras, and these are video makers who do it all the time. So on the basis of that, I think that's probably quite a strong recommendation to consider switching, and that way I can have two different camera shots, one for sort of general view and one for close-ups. I think the Hawaii could be good for close-ups and the iPhone for wider view, but you still have the same ultimate problem, is that unless you have a wide field of vision, you are going to be stuck with a limited field of vision. I mean, sorry, saying the obvious, but the thing about that is that you can only see so much at a time. It's probably good for all the used people not to see me and try and keep it on the guitar, but you still have the problem that you often have to end up moving the camera, and when there's just one person doing this, that then becomes a bit of a chore, and there's all this whole load of bang, crunch, slam as you grab the camera and move it around, and just hold on a second. So it's a bit of a faff. Anyhow, but it's worth trying, and maybe I can get a long shot with a longish shot, mid to long shot with the Sony phone, and a close-ups, roving close-ups with the Huawei, possibly on the Magic Arm. So maybe the Sony has to go on some other kind of arrangement. Actually, maybe the Hawaii isn't so brilliant on the Magic Arm. Maybe the Magic Arm should be away out somewhere in the room, up in the corner there, shooting down or whatever. Something that's a wider field of vision. Anyway, so that's to come. Good things to come. So what you can see here for a minute is we're at the stage where I have fitted the studs in the new bridge studs. Now they don't even want to go in, can you believe? Stay upright, thank you. Fitted the new studs for the new bridge, and now we're going to place the bridge on with some strings for the first time. Now this is a momentous moment, because in a way this is the first time we get to have a feel about whether this thing is going to work the way I want it to work. Now I'm just going to do a little thing. These, I just did an attempt earlier on, a couple of days ago, of, I see I can bring the things to the thing. Right, there's the camera there. These are incredibly stiff. It's a failing of this bridge. It's a beautiful bridge otherwise, but what they've done is they've painted the screws as well at the same time as they have done the whole bridge, and it leaves them very stiff. So I'm going to either have to oil them and or work them a bit before we go into any intonation areas. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the bridge on. Ta-da! Then what I'm going to do is I don't want the bridge to flip off, so I'm going to start with a middle string, otherwise known in the trade as something like a D. Actually, what I'm going to do is try and find my other string winder, because I've left one at home. So, dig around in here, string winder. Oh, thank God for that. It's close to hand. Otherwise, it could have been a long, dreary break. This might have to become the regular one now I've finally got it out of the dusty box. Okay, so I'm going to sort of go on. Oh, these are locking tuners, aren't they? Look at that. Right, so first of all, let's line them all up. So this is the first time I'm going to see what the actual spread of strings looks like, and I'm sacrificing a whole set of brand new strings for the purpose of this. Now, first thing to tell you is they're going to be miles too tall, and we know that, okay? And I'm going to pull back a little bit, and I'm going to lock with a bit of room for locking on the string. And the reason for that is, in this case, especially as we're doing sort of testing things, I'm going to want some take off rethread room, and if you put them straight the way through, you don't have that room. All that happens is you crimp them at their fullest stretch, and then you come to remove them and slack them off, and then you want to come and use them again. Sorry about my arm being right in the way. Yeah, you run the risk of putting them through the second time, and they crimp back down on the exact same spot, in which case they break straight away. So a little trick I learned a long time ago is there's absolutely no huge major benefit from pushing them through as far as you can go, right? They can tolerate a little bit of extra material going through, extra string going through. It won't store up tons of slack for you, not so that it would matter, and it will buy you that one restring thing that I was talking about, or one adjustment, de-string and restring. Now the first thing that's going to happen is, I can slack these off, I don't want them too tight. First thing that happens is I can see where things start to lie, and as we predicted at the end, we've got a bit of splaying of the strings, but that's par for the course for this interesting conversion. We're never going to avoid that because we're using only 6 of the 7 through holes, which actually looks fairly tidy as it is. And what happens is the strings will get to the bridge, and then they'll just perform like a normal 6 string. There's a very small angle on the far side of the bridge, but because the strings aren't moving really across that bridge, and barely at all, and they've got to roll it anyway, even if they are moving a tiny bit, it's not really going to affect it in any deleterious fashion. Anyhow, so here we are in an interesting place where you can see a ultra-wide 6-string guitar emerging. Now you can tell that it's sitting on top of this way too tall steel bridge, and I didn't cut this down. I screwed this in as it is because this is a custom-made nut, and because obviously you can see that I've had to cut those slots because I made them. I marked them out as a custom nut. Then there's no avoiding cutting the slots. Occasionally, when I'm able to use, or not on this kind of conversion, but on a standard setup where I've chosen to replace the standard 6-string nut with one of my adjustable Tusq nuts, part of the benefit of doing that, and why it's worth, I charge a little extra for doing it, is because one of the benefits is that you get to have factory made slots. And the reason you get to use the smooth factory made slots is because it's an adjustable nut, you get to lift the whole nut up to the exact action you want, the precise first fret action, and therefore you never have to cut downwards, you just bring the whole lot up. And that gives you not only the PTFE that's in the Tusq, which is a great advantage, but it also gives you that extra little bit of having nut slots that are as pristine as they were in the factory. And why not? Because no matter how good you are with a nut file, and no matter how good your nut files are, how expensive they are, when you look at them under a magnifying glass or a microscope, they are still ragged by comparison to the factory made ones. Okay, so straight away, I'm not going to cut these off simply because if we do need to remove them, it will still make it easier if we've got that extra stuff to thread through. But you can see now we've got a guitar which I can offer up to the camera. So here's our modified 6-string made out of 7 through strings. Of course it looks a bit raggedy now because the strings aren't tightened, so they're looking a bit gloopy the way they're sitting. And obviously looking at it immediately, the height is a bit too much, so we're going to dial in this one a bit and dial in this one a bit, and try and keep them about the same. And we can take it down until we kind of get somewhere. Now, got to remember that we're starting from a high action at the other end. So if we want to, sorry about the view, if it doesn't work here, I blame the camera angles. So if you're ever in a situation and you want the nut is a mile high, and you want a quick way of sort of getting it down to somewhere thereabouts where you're going to be, get a capo on this end, and then you can do your sort of test height from this end. And so I'm going to put a little bit more, whatever that stuff is called, tension. And I'm missing the far tuner, which is actually quite easier than I thought. Okay, so now I've got the strings on reasonably under tension, and right away I can tell you that these strings aren't going to be perfectly spaced down here because I haven't really done it deliberately, so I can just waltz this one a bit and go, no, that's a bit too far the wrong way, and I just swizzle it the other way, and there's still a bit too narrow a gap, and I go, okay, happy with that. This one needs to come a bit to the right. Happy with that. Now, for the sake of setting this up, I'm going to leave that there. So now, with my strings on and the capo approximating roughly the sort of height of the action that we'll end up with at that end, I'm going to see what we can get with this guitar, because we don't know. I've never played it. It's a new one on me, and actually Peter's never played it either. So let's see if we can go to the 1.5mm type of action at the low E. And what's great about this is that we've got, you know, the right sort of spread of actions over this, you know, on both sides of the bridge. Now, what I'm also seeing here is a bit of a, let me just double check this. We've got a bit of a high spot. I wonder if this bridge is a uniform one-way bridge. I have a horrible feeling. And the reason I'm saying that is if the grooves aren't wide enough, or it, you know what, it may just be, or it may just be that the barrel, you know, roller isn't sitting down. What I'm seeing is there is actually the G is actually a little bit higher. That could be because it's still loose, but we'll take a closer look at that. It might be, if I'm not happy with that, I may have to put this on hold while I send it back, and we don't really have a lot of options. I haven't had this problem before, and if it is a fault on this bridge, then they're not going to get away with it for 50 quid, let me tell you that much. You know, you can't work with, you can't slot it, you can't cut it down any further. I will need to look at it in very close-up detail to check and see whether there is actually a difference between these saddles in terms of the thickness of or the width of the gap. If that were the case, you'd expect this to be too narrow for the G to get down into it, and it would mean that the next one would be the right one for the G. And really, unless I can see a tangible difference between these two, then I'm afraid I'm not going to assume that that's the case. And I may have to, I don't know, you know something? I think that one's a deeper slot. In which case, let's try it the other way around. I hate to do this because it's going to mean slacking all of these off again, but let's try it the other way around. It could just be that this has a one-directional thing, which would be an absolute pain because it then puts screw faces on the inside, which makes that harder to adjust. Normally, tunematic bridges don't have that imbalance there. It's not as if one of the slots is, go the other way. It's not as if there's that much difference, but there may be on this, and we don't know. They may have done it so precisely that it's gauged precisely. And what we've got here, or what I'm experiencing here, could be the mix-up between the wound and the wound G and the the wound D and the bare G, if you get what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, we shall slack everything off again. This is stressing the strings, so this is why you would always you do this kind of work with sacrificial strings, because the bending on and tightening up and bending off type of stuff will always end up with the string eventually breaking, which is something you don't want to have happen. So I'm going to go switch it round again, drop it down, and slowly reconnect or retighten the strings. I would be thrilled if it is unidirectional, not because I really want it to be that, and I don't think it's a good idea, particularly as I said, because of the facing of the screws now are facing at least accessible place. But you know, that's a problem we can solve separately. The bigger problem would be if the G is actually raised too high by comparison to the others. So it would not be a great start. So anyway, fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Sit up, sit down. So with this thing, you can almost never just tighten up and it's all there. You have to sort of be careful and make sure it's on the saddle before you tighten it up, or else you'd be going back and untightening. Anyhow, today was another hospital visit, but not a major one. It was just a couple of hours round trip, and that was to a wound check. So after Claire's surgery last year, because of various things, she took a while to recover, and in a sense got stuck into chemo before her wound was surgery wounds were fully recovered. So it's been a problem, or it's been a challenge ever since. Okay, well, you know what? I'll let them off. That amazingly, that works. I'm very relieved in a way, because I didn't want to be sending this bridge back. It doesn't tell you it makes that much difference, and if you didn't have a bit of a beady eye on it, you wouldn't know. So I'm pleased that it is unidirectional. Now you can hear this is kind of buzzing and whatnot. That's because we've got it clamped we've got it capoed, and the capo will set by default an extremely low action. I'll take it off in a minute now, because what we'll then do is work the strings down at the nut end to their correct height. But I just want to get this kind of close to where we want to be. 1.5, that's 1.5, so we want to come in a bit further on. Oh, wrong way. No, I'm going the wrong way. It's in, you fool. Kato, you fool. That's under. We go up. Okay, for me that's okay to start with. Now, the thing that's worth looking at straight away in terms of, can we live with this? Well, first of all, can we live with the spread of the strings? I can now live with the fact that the G is no longer higher than the rest, which is great. Can we live with the spread of the strings across here? Yes, we can. Does it look terrible on that side? Not as far as I'm concerned. Looks okay on here? Yeah, I mean, you know it's a 7, but really it's going to do the job. Does it look bad across the pickup poles? No, because there aren't any. And then the question next is, this is the bit where it will really show up that it's conversion, is the excessive real estate here. Now, we can't get any wider. We can't shrink this neck down because it's a set neck. We can expand the bridge, but we've done it already to the maximum width. So this is as near to the edge of the fingerboard you're ever going to get. However, that's really not the biggest issue. When you get down here, you can still reach them without too much problem. And for Pete and others like him, who by the way, having sent me a guitar for this job, they get called Big ever after. So for Big Pete, it's what's down here that matters. And this is, obviously it's out of tune, but this is a really nice big handful of chord, and he'll never have played a guitar with as big a spread as that before. Now apparently they used to make one a long time ago, and it used to be called something like the Big Lou. Of course, that's where it got its big designation from. And as far as I understand, I think some of the people who came to me for this conversion came to me because the Big Lou people had stopped making it. So there's naught you can do about that. It's history by the sounds of it. But this is not a bad solution, and it remains to be seen how it will play and so on. But so the purist might look at it and say, well, I think it's a bit of a hack job to make something work that way, blah blah blah. And of course, yes, it is. But you have to say to yourself, what is the alternative for somebody with extremely large hands who can't enjoy playing guitar like you and I can? I'm going to just take these down a bit so they're not right in the way of the camera. For somebody who's not enjoyed the ability to just sit down and pick some chords out and have a play along with a favourite tune. If this enables, and it has done in the past, if this enables people with big hands to play, then actually the first thing to say is whether you might find the butchery a little bit unsettling. You have to remember that it's worth it for the people who are going to get a guitar out of it that they can play. Now, I had interestingly before, just after Pete contacted me about this one, I had Vince drop me a line, a couple of years since I'd done his, and just dropped a line to check in and say thank you, or say hi and thank me for the work I did on it, because he said he was still loving it, and he'd made some real progress in his guitar playing and so on because of that big guitar. Now that was, in many ways, that was a much uglier a conversion than this, and it wasn't, because the guitar actually wasn't basically ideally suited to the conversion, but it's the best we had for the money. The slight problem about this, of course, is this is not a cheap guitar to begin with. However, there will be others, cheaper ones. Some of the Harley Bentons, for example, 7 strings, may well be suitable as well. We just went with this because it happened to be what Big Pete likes, so we went with what he likes because he was treating himself to a guitar that he would like to look at as well as play. But this is pretty expensive as a start point, as is the Epiphone Matt Heafy sort of Les Paul looking thing, 7 string, that's coming tomorrow hopefully, and we'll do the conversion for that one over the weekend. It's going to be very similar to this in the process, just a different guitar, and so that Big Pete's going to have 2 sets of guitars to play, and both really good quality basic guitars. These have got EMGs on it. I can't remember what's on the Matt Heafy one. So here's a challenging bit. We've got a tall nut, and I left it deliberately tall because I wanted to screw it in place. I didn't want to cut it down any further. I wanted to screw it in place, and I wanted to work down the nut. And when we finish working down, we will have, I suppose you'd say, we'll have a load of V-notch slots for the strings to sit in. Now they'll look terrible for the time being, but what will happen is that as I cut them down, or as they get deeper and deeper, when we get to the right height, we'll stop. Obviously, that's the whole point of cutting the slots. And after we've done the setup part of everything, once we've got the right action, then we'll be able to take the strings off, do the fret polishing and all of that stuff, clean the fretboard, start cleaning the guitar up. But we'll also be able to reshape this with the files and get it down so that the nut slots revert to looking like just fine little notches, relatively small notches. But this allows us, I'm going to put it under a little bit more tension, this is going to allow us to just cut down with our sort of heavy earth moving equipment. Now when you are going down quite a long distance in the nut slot, you have to be quite careful about the keeping your file as sort of vertical, or the top of the file as parallel as you can to the flat surface of the fingerboard. And the deeper you go, the harder that is to achieve. But if you feel that you're kind of going off on a tilt or drifting off somewhere, you could think of another approach. You could do quite a lot of the heavy lifting work of this with a file that you have that you know is pretty sharp, but you can also then see when it's cutting down. Now, of course, this is the low E string, and that's way too fat for the G string. Okay, but what we're just using it for is a downward cut. Now, when we've got to the end of that, we still wouldn't want to try and put the triangular file in just for now, because what we'd find is the triangular file will be too wide to fit in this narrow slot. So what I would then suggest we do is drop the strings off the side, file it right down till we're near the bottom of these great big wide E string slots all over the place, and then go over it again and do the last little drop down to the correct action with the that file I just mentioned, this one, the V file. Okay, now it depends on which files you've got that are really sharp. Some of mine have had their day actually, and it almost feels like I need to put them on the bandsaw and chop them. That's the problem with these kinds of files. I really do lose my kind of interest and patience in them over time, because eventually if they don't blunt, they bend, and you end up with something that really isn't any good. So I found that this is a much more dependable file, and then if you have to, you can have a set of these to round off the bottom of the slots when you get there, and that's a much better approach. Now I'm going to do a little bit more with this, and then I'm going to switch to the other. And partly the reason I'm doing this here with this one is I'm looking to, I want a straight slot for a start, so I have to be careful. These files bend too easily. So I'm cutting a straight slot, nice and low, just checking that it hasn't gone wandering too far. And then I want to stop about there, because I don't want to go much further. It gives me a pretty good guide to how much I'm going to be taking away. And look, we can even get zoomification. Now look at that. I'll do that for the next one. So I'm going to stop there. Again, we can put the next one in. Out. Spike yourself. Put the next one in. Move it off to one side, and we can make the follow the line to begin with this V file. I mean, we can go the whole way down, but like I say, the only constraint or worry is that it can wander a little bit to one side. Again, it's not too much of a problem if you stop before you've gone all the way down, because then you've still got room to kind of draw it back and recover it. So here I am at that depth, and I'm going to now get this up into play. Just kind of try and keep this one in line with everything so that this levels or stops being, well, it's still a straight slot. Ultimately, when we finish up with just a little slot made by the edge of this, it's hardly going to break the surface. Almost, it's just going to be enough to hold the string from any sideways movement that we don't want. So, and then also you can it doesn't hurt to de-gunge your file blades as well, and you probably get a bit of an easier cut out of it. See, this one is misleading. It's actually got a buckle in it, so I really could do with this being cut off short and using some section in the middle here all the time, but probably ought to just draw it in. Problem with this is that you'd rather it was short, because down here you possibly run the risk of clunking into the headstock, which you don't want to do. So, like I say, the very end tip is now already bent, which is not helpful. So we're trying to find our way to a straight cutting place and doing it without hitting the headstock. Not there yet. So this is how cutting nut slots would have been for me all those years before I was using adjustable nuts. And you know, it was something I would always do, because once you've discovered the importance of the nut in keeping the guitar in tune, in making the guitar play and stay in tune, there's no way you will compromise. You're going to have the correct first fret action and good slots, whether it kills you, and sometimes it does, because it takes you hours. And then if you overcut by a fraction, you have to start again or replace the nut and so on. So it can be an absolutely miserable undertaking, but I would do it because, you know, I say once you've realised that that's what matters, there's no way you're going to compromise and give somebody or yourself a guitar that doesn't stay in tune. It's like settling for less than perfection. It's not an option. So that, you know, for a while that became, see, this is now where you run out of space, and I really don't want, I haven't got a metal cutter that's going to do that in a clean line. If I had, I could do it with a Dremel, I suppose. Hacksaw, I could probably hacksaw it. Let's just have a look. I think I'm going to do it, you know, because I want a straight bit, and I don't want this buckle at the end that's going to get in the way. Problem is, how do you spot which is the duff bit? Yeah, it didn't really tell me the truth either. Yeah, when you get down here, you're going to run it. If you try and use a middle section of the file, you end up running into the tuner. So you're kind of confined to the very end of the file, which may or may not have any good cutting life left in it. But anyway, we'll just keep going until we get close. So it's a slow process, but it's very worthwhile. Could have, as I say, we could have cut the nut down from the underside earlier if we had wished to, but there comes a point where I suddenly feel more comfortable going downwards to reach the correct playing height than coming up from the bottom. And this is quite nice because this nut is held in without any glue and it's screwed in place, and that's where we start to see now just gone a little bit inwards, which is cool. So we can actually start again on this one. I'm going to stop that one there and move to this side, and then we'll do the same with these. Try and keep it in a straight line with this tool here. I've already made the first mark, so it's you've got a good start point for positioning. It's just we'll have to double check it as we get deeper, because it has the risk of wandering. to go. See, in a way, this is still the most reliable of all of these things. There are a couple more that have a sort of, yeah, I don't know what you call them. This is one that people sometimes use. It's not a bad one for shifting the material. It does open the slot up quite a bit, but it's actually not bad for coming back to it afterwards. Actually, in fact, it's probably a good one to just reopen this one up a bit, just to draw it back out to where it should be. Just slightly rearrange that gap. Actually, that's okay. That's what I want. Right. Okay, stop with that one. I'll try this one a bit more. See if it's the right one for the job just now. It's quite interesting. There's a thin end and a thick end. So if we start at the thinner end, just to get a bit of bite, and then move it to the fatter end, which then takes some width out as well. When you're doing this sort of thing, to begin with, it feels really daunting because it feels like an enormous amount of material you've got to move. But the reality is, when you start to get into the right heights, it starts to come together. And the secret is, as with all these things, like if you're carving, chiseling, all that sort of stuff with wood, the secret is to approach it from a distance, to kind of come in from afar and start with big strokes, and then work your way in, and then as you get closer to the mark, you're kind of slowing down, or reducing the amount of bite you're taking, so that you don't run any risk of overcutting. So it's a technique I remember I figured out when I was making a deck in my home years ago, down in Wales, and it occurred to me that if you go at making a deck, and and same with a deck or a homemade bookcase or clothes wardrobe, if you start off, you bolt everything. Your first two pieces are bolted tightly together. You start off with a kind of rigidity, and everything gets more rigid after that, to the point where it's impossibly stiff and nothing will actually work together. And often you end up having to sort of quit and start again, because it's just become this sort of rigor mortis of tension. And what I discovered when it came to deck making is that I could sort of place everything really, really lightly to begin with, and then once I would do some things really solidly, like, for example, I would put the corner posts, or my foundation posts, would be incredibly solid. So I would have great big tannalized 4x4s sunk, or even 6x4s sunk into deep concrete footings, and then I would come up, put in a horizontal, lightly tack it in with a nail or something, or a screw or bolt, and then deliberately only lightly tack it, and then get it lined up with a spirit level, and lightly tack it in the other end, so that I could get the spirit level, the level correct, before I went anywhere near a solid heavy bolt to lock it into place. And then after that, it was a matter of when I was absolutely certain it was in the right place, then I could put the heavy bolts on it and make the things that needed to be rigid. And it was a pretty good way of going about it, and I found that I could get a heck of a lot done that way without making mistakes and ending up with things that were just over constrained or constricted. So there's a lot of sanding down of the nut to do now. sometimes, if you want, the way of doing this is you can put the strings in the slots. If you're nervous about it, put the strings in the slots. We'll do them back up a little bit. And then go sand down on top of them. I've got to get them in the barrel. I keep calling it a barrel. It's a roller. Yeah, so put the strings in and we'll keep sanding on top of the strings until such times as we feel like we're about to cut the middle of the strings off. And then you get a sort of clear idea of how much further you need to take off. You don't want to do, and it is possible to go too far, you end up with not enough material to hold the string, and that's a disaster in its own right because you've ruined the nut. How are we looking in terms of close-ups? Oh yeah. Okay, so I can see quite comfortably there's plenty more to go, and I'm tilting back a little bit. We're sort of not far off on the low E, but we've got quite a bit on the others to go. Certainly D and the G and the other plain strings are way down in the slots comparatively. So there's just quite a bit of that, and you can see how much detritus there is. And of course we can smooth this out when we get down to the nut, but it will be a very tidy and neat little functioning nut, which is perfect for this guitar. You know, that's what we're doing. We're making the exact right nut for this guitar and nothing else. It doesn't have to do anything but serve this guitar. Still quite a lot too tall or too deep on the treble side, so we've got a bit more to do down there. So this amount of sanding now will take us close to where we want to get, but there's still a fair bit of still quite a deep slot. But what we can do now is we could work the rest of these slots now with just the V notch, and then we'll take the strings right out and we'll do the last bit of filing. So if we do that bit now, we'll do the V notch to reach our desired altitudes. This doesn't have to be, ow, there's nothing in that one, Samuel. Ow, spike. I hate these things. These don't have to be full playing tension. All we need is that we're convinced or we're confident they're sitting down in the bottom of the slot where they should be. Right, so we're just pulling these off to the side. So now we're going to pull out our feeler gauge, and I'm going to go on this guitar for a 0.4. And the reason I'm going for 0.4 and not 0.3, I've got blood from the bloody string ends, is that I know that Peter's a large-handed chap, and do you know what? I'm not taking this off. I can't stand the wounds any further. It's not worth the pain. I'll sacrifice another set of strings if I have to, or I'll fight to get them through. I can't be cutting this off anymore. Yes, you know, a big, strong-handed chap is going to press fairly hard, so I don't think we need to worry about him not being able to reach the, or not be able to press the strings down. Okay, so what I'm just doing now is I'm going back to the slot, and I'm just lightly making a nice low slot there, and we're not far off. Now, actually see this slot on here has got a bit of a rough spot, so I'm just going to use this one here just to try and clear that out, because we don't want a rough walled slot. We're getting close now to the height. That's great. Technically speaking, I don't really want to cut any further down until I've cleaned this even down. I want to do the very last runs with possibly these files, but I'm almost where I want to be, so I'll stop just above the 0.4, and I'll do the same for these other ones now with the V files. This is a few times around to get this right, but it's worth doing. So but what you can see is, having removed a lot of the depth, now I can easily get in with this file it's not being prevented from cutting. I'll do a little bit more, and then again I'll stop, and we'll look to complete this at the end. I want to make sure that that V is nice and clean. Okay, we're nearly there. I mean, you could play this now and it would feel great compared to what it was before. Okay, and let's have a look. Now, where do we want to go on this? Do we want to go? We do want a tiny bit further out. So while we're still up, I'm going to get my. Actually, this has become my palette cleaner of slots. So I'm just going to run this in here and make it take the slot a little bit to the side where I want it. So it's cleaned out. That's it. Perfect. And that's nearly where I want. But now I just want to introduce the slot, the point of this at the bottom, near that side, a bit further out if possible. And that becomes my working slot, which we will aim to reconnect with a bit later. That's good. Okay, close enough. I mean, this is a bit over still, but I want to come back to it. I'm going to take down a lot of this excess material before we come in for that last pass. So now we're doing the bass strings from the D outwards, and again I'm going to use the V notch file again, just feeling it to make sure it's in the right plane, and I'm not going to go wandering off to one side or the other as I cut. A nice clean V for the time being. Now, the truth is, you know, people go, well, you can't play on a V, it's not the right shape, it doesn't mimic the rounded shape of the string. Well, that's true, it doesn't, but I can tell you from experience, if you only had this tool, it would actually be quite effective, because we could play this guitar right now, and because this is a Tusq nut, I guarantee you we could just go ahead and play and this thing would perform for us, and we would probably hardly even notice that I haven't, quote unquote, rounded out the bottom matron of the slot. Oh wow. And what I'm going to do after I've done these two, I'm going to just strum it and see what a 7-string guitar feels like. Then I'm going to go and get my hot water bucket to wash my hands, make my cup of tea, go offline for a few minutes, and we'll come back when it's time to just finalize the nut slots, and then I think we'll be sort of close to doing any fret leveling, which we haven't even looked at yet, of course, because we haven't really got the setup. So remember, the setup in my world consists primarily of 3 things. Now there are more things. So for example, you might say, well, a critical variable in my guitar setup is how hard I hit the strings. Well, yes, exactly. But when I talk about setup, I say the guitar's, stop buzzing, the guitar components that the guitar is responsible for in the setup, in my book, come to 3 things, and that is the neck relief, the first fret action, which we're setting now, and the last fret action, which we set later on. Now this is sitting down on the bridge, not on the roller, which is annoying. So that puts that a little tiny bit higher, but it's nothing to worry about. So the 3 components of the action, the neck relief, or how curved the neck is, the first fret action, how far the string is from the top of, how far the underside of the string is from the top of the first fret, and the last fret action, which is how high the bridge is set and what the measurement at the last fret is. Those 3 components we're going to set in a minute, and then we're going to, once we've set them, then what I'm going to do is to check how the guitar plays at the chosen action that I've set. And this is a point at which often you would expect to come across uneven frets or notes choking when you try to bend them and so on. And that's usually when you discover that your guitar has some uneven frets that need taking care of through the process of fret leveling. And that's what we'll do. But we won't know that, or we won't be able to say anything conclusively about that until we've got those 3 parts set. So at the moment I'm just taking care of the first one. Now it doesn't, some people get all particular about the order. You could do it in any order you like. I'm going to now tune this up to pitch for the first ever time, which is quite an exciting moment for a new guitar. Some people, usually I'll probably normally start with the probably normally start with the relief. Look at that, in tune by chance. Oh, wrong one. In tune by chance. Not in tune. Or in tune. Wow. Isn't that amazing? A 6-string, ultra-wide 6-string is born. Woo! Right, so let's check our neck relief. So we've got our first fret action temporarily. We're most of the way there, right? It's not exactly perfect, but we'll come back to it for reasons I've been through already. But we capo it, and now we're going to hold down the last fret, and we're going to look at the neck relief. It's very, very little at all. It's about 0.1, and that will be just fine for me. I'm not going to even adjust it unless we need to. We also know we roughly know our last fret action. We can double check it now. Well, that's a little bit higher than I would go. That's about 2. So we can dial some more in here. If I can get this to turn under pressure. It starts to get a little bit harder now. We might need our device won't turn that one. It's a different sort of beastie. We have to slack off strings to really get that down at all. We're about 0.5 millimeter out. So let's do it, because that's what we're here for. So like another detuning. This is why I have sacrificial strings, because your customer strings, you put on a new set of strings, you don't want to be doing all of this to them, because the customer's strings, by the time they get there, will be kind of worn out basically. So down a bit here and down a bit there. Again, a bit of trial and error. Not the, a tunematic bridge, for all its evils, is a bit easier to tweak in this situation. This kind of bridge requires a bit more off and oning, you know what I mean. Then we get our, just pull the strings, settle them a bit. It feels great, this does, I have to say. And there's no reason why it shouldn't play really well. I mean, it's an extra long scale length. It's a long scale length, but it's close enough to feel like a guitar. Wrong key. Okay, so we're on what? We're just over 1.5. Right, for now, I'm cool with that. And we're just 1.5 on that side. In a real pushy world, I'd go down a little bit further from that. Truth to tell, I think we ought to, because if we're going to aim for that with the fret leveling, let's be where we intend to start, or start where we intend to go on, or whatever. It's a bit of fiddle, but you know, let's do it. Right, this is a much solider tuning device. It's actually narrower as well than the blue one. I think you've got a job, sunshine. Right, a bit more down, a bit more down. Perhaps a bit too much down in this. Okay, one more time. Now tell you what, let's do something. Let's be economical. While this is off, let us be lovers. I can't sing that, I'll get copyrighted. Let us mark up these frets. Now these have some wear grooves in them. You know, I could only really see it once I got the strings off and stuff. But so it has been played fairly hard by the looks of it. But at the same time, there's still plenty enough material on the frets to allow us to do the precision fret leveling. And as I say precision, I use a 400 grit paper, and it's going to be the smallest amount of material taken as is possible for the maximum amount of accuracy. So it's why I use this method more than any other kind. I don't use the other kind of method anymore because it's really, I'm doing this because it's a little bit more accurate and because it saves fret metal, which is a pretty good reason in my book. Right, I'm just going to try and keep these on the thing. Okay, so yeah, I just went to the bank today and I withdrew money. Got my fingerprints all over this right now because my hands are now grubby with all this Tusq. I withdrew money to give to my landlord tomorrow, paying him 6 months rent and electricity up front, and it's such a blessing to be able to do that and not have to worry for that time. I mean, I have to worry about getting work in and doing it and doing the job right and so on and so on, but not to be able to do that, get settled here. To get settled here without having to worry for a few months. It's great. It goes for the wrong one every time. Sweet sounding, feels sweet too. So the question now is, do all the notes play at this action? Now if they do, we're in luck because that means we can get on without doing any fret leveling. The question would be, would I do fret leveling? We better zoom out. Would I do fret leveling? Sorry about this close-up, people. Hey, you in close-up camera land. Would I do fret leveling, just inverted commas, to remove these wear marks? That's the question, and my answer is normally no. To me, at this level of, it plays great here. To me, cosmetic marks on the frets are not a good enough reason to spend fret metal, which is, not to find a point on it, is your fret life, right? So I don't think, if the thing about those marks is that they're not, typically, they don't interfere with play. They're cosmetic almost entirely. I mean, you can see them, but they're cosmetic. They don't click or catch the string. They're smooth because they've been played so much over the years. And so you never really, you don't really have to do anything with them unless you want them to look differently. And then my argument would be, or my point would be, yeah, that loose jack socket, maybe not. Yes, loose jack socket. Yeah, so the issue would be, it's cosmetic, it's not getting in the way of play, and I'm not going to trade it off for fret metal. So let's just get the amp out for a minute. This will be the first moment where this little critter comes to life. I don't even know what the different kind of 2 tones, 2 volumes. Who knows? Oh, it's so big! The thing. Now I would do fret leveling for this because this, what I've just picked up here, actually isn't just cosmetic. We've got some dings here that we need to make go away. So in this case we would do it, even if it plays pretty well. Okay, we've got the booster on, so let's get rid of that. Let's go to clean. Okay, actually, I think this may be, for this action, this may be a fraction too flat. Oh, Christ. Don't like that. Too low, too flat for this action. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. It's 1.6, so it's not the lowest in the universe, but it's the tiniest bit of hint of fret slap, but it's not much. Yeah, I can really feel those grooves now. I think something's happened. This has hit something or been bashed. So we've got more damage there than I thought. Strings have been bashed against the frets. Now I'm foolishly wearing off the black material. I think we're going to be okay for this. I'm not going to do any more bending just now until I've finished and cleaned everything up. I'll double check it, and I'm going to get filthy if I don't stop and do the leveling next. So what I can tell you is, what we know is we've got some dings and chips in the frets, which means we have to do leveling. There's no two ways around it. We could do the leveling now with the action set here, and I can tweak it afterwards, so I won't worry about getting the exact first fret action just now. This is good enough to do the setup. So we're now in the position to do the fret leveled precision setup, and for that I'm going to use my if I can get it off the magnets. These are killer magnets, I tell you. I'm going to use my extra thin fret leveling beam, and the reason for that one is this one goes a little bit flatter than the other one, the StewMac U channel beam. So I'll go with this one. I need a, excuse me, lean in front of you. It's very rude, I know. I need a little hex key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the balance the guitar halfway along its neck. I don't know what you can see. You can see all right. Yeah, you can see a load of white mucky cloths over in the corner. I will take a break in a second. So I'm going to set up in the normal way, and I'm going to figure out where the places are that these are going to sit. Right, my equidistant things, those are brass things, and I'm going to, because the frets are a bit bigger, so I just have to kind of wheel things to get them right. So I need a bit more curve in this. So I'm going to calibrate for this very flat neck, and then I'm going to get on and I'm going to fret level. I'm going to start now, and in fret leveling I'm going to be watching out to try and clear this damage, which is a little bit more tricky now, because if it was just ordinary cowboy chords wear, oh sorry, you're looking straight at me, you want to be looking at that. If it was standard sort of cowboy chord wear that you'd expect from a guitar that's been played a long time, then even if you did level it out now, it would be lifted out pretty quickly. The problem that we've got here, and you wouldn't know this from the Schaller, and the Schaller probably didn't mention this, is we have not only some wear, but we've got some little dings where I think this guitar's fallen probably a bit on its face, which is quite common, and the strings get slammed very quickly into the frets, and rather than just sort of gentle wear, you get, I can see them there, actually little chips. We'll do the best, I'll do the best I can to get them out. What I don't want to do is leave you with a fretless wonder. Fretless wonder, just, well, not for just anything, that wouldn't be a good outcome at all. Of course, a guitar like this, if the frets really were worn out beyond saving, then of course there's always an option to refret this as much as anything else, and depending on what the radius is. I can't remember what it was now, I did look, but okay, slightly over curved, but actually, you know what, I quite like that, just a little bit of extra. Now, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense in this. You've been doing this a long time, you kind of know why, but that's a step too far for this video. So I'm calibrating the banana, as I call it, or basically the truss rod with the sandpaper on the bottom. It's less amusing a name. I calibrate it pretty much as closely as I can to the shape of this neck, the curve of this neck, and I then, once I think it's pretty much in the curve of this neck, I then go up and down like this until I've leveled out any uneven frets. If you watched my stuff before, you'll also know that one of the biggest challenges you've got in leveling guitar frets isn't actually the high frets, it's the low frets. The high fret is kind of pretty straightforward. It stands in front of you, says I'm high, come and chop my head off. A little bit of, okay, that's across into the G track. We'll catch up with that. That's still a little bit high. Yeah, so a high fret is pretty straightforward. It says I'm high, come and take the high bit down, and you use your leveling tool like I've got here, and you take it down. A low fret, by contrast, is a low one amongst, not high ones, but a low one sitting amongst regular height ones. And the problem with that is a low fret makes the next one relatively high. So even if the next one is the same as all the others, the low fret turns it into a high fret, and you have to, and in doing so, that fret then chokes off the notes, or causes buzzing or choking when you bend across into that, towards that fret. Now, at that point, you really haven't got any choice but to level everything until you bottom out around the low point of the low fret, and that can be quite a scary undertaking, because it doesn't sound very good that you're having to take metal off all the frets just to get down to one fret, which is the lowest common denominator, and you don't know why it's low. Could have been the wrong gauge, accidentally got put in, highly unlikely, but could have been. This is great. Ooh. A little bit more in that middle bit there, and there's just a little bit of zzz as we went across there, but it's actually coming together really well. So yeah, so you just have to have the courage and take down the whole of the surrounding frets just enough. Now on the plus side, the actual measurements we're talking that get in the way and that we have to subsequently remove in this leveling process are minuscule anyway, so you really aren't taking a lot of material. So what sounds daunting, which is to bottom out one single canyon of a low fret, actually isn't that dramatic. And to be fair, I've never had one that's so low that it actually required, or it suggested that it would be a smarter thing to pull the fret and replace it, because actually it would have to be incredibly bad to do that, because that brings with it a whole set of problems. It might sound like a good idea, but you look at these frets here and they are already, what, a third worn. Now see if you can find me a new fret that starts off at that height. Well, you probably can't. So it's either going to sit too low, which is no point, or it's going to sit too high, in which you've now got the challenge of, normally when you have a high fret, it's only a fraction high, and it just takes a tiny little bit of everything to bring that one down. But if you're starting with a fret which is significantly higher, then you could be taking off a ton of other material that you really didn't want to be taking off before you get it down to where you want it. Now, the other thing about the judgment call on this is that because I already know that the frets have got these chips on them, I'm putting a bit of extra muscle, if you like, or effort into leveling them further than I would if they didn't have those chips. See, if it was just cosmetic, I would be quite happy to stop it about back then. We'll leave a very faint groove, but it would hardly be noticeable, and when we sand it out you wouldn't even notice it with your fingers. But because it's got chips in it, notches, dings. Because it's got them in it, we really have to get rid of those, because that was the thing that will spoil play more than anything else, is this sort of clunky chip taken out of your fret. Okay, so this is feeling really good actually at the moment. I'm amazed how this is playing, and I think this is going to be an incredible extra wide 6-string guitar. And it might look like a lot of leveling, but it really isn't that much. It just makes a load of dust. Pretty impressed actually. I'm kind of happy with this. I'm looking forward to sending these on Monday. Hopefully send both of them to Pete. Because if we get the other one in tomorrow, we should be able to do it over the weekend if it's kind of similar process to this one. I mean, one of the biggest challenges in this is obviously the bridge thing. You've got to be able to pull the original bridge studs out. And I said before yesterday on the video, you know, if somebody's glued them in or resined them in to the Matt Heafy Epiphone, then we could be in a tricky position where we might be forced to try and drill them out, which starts to feel a lot more destructive and worrying than being able to gently lever them out with a lever. Literally lever them out with a lever. Could you believe it? It's not bad. I'm going to go one more time down the edge there, and then I'm done for this bit. And you can see I'm getting filthy, so it'll be good to take a break, go and clean up, get a cup of tea, take a break, come back. Because in a way, by the time I've just done this, the hardest bit will be complete, and we'll be ready to kind of go spinning down the alpine mountainside, singing, "The years are alive with the sound of music." Yeah, okay. Good. That is it. Filthy. One thing I'll do before wait a second. One thing I'll do before, I'm not going to take these strings right off. I'm going to get them off to the side. I'm going to take down the remainder of this excess. And so there's a lot of it, and when you see what I'll end up with, and how, in other words, how shallow this bridge is going to be, you'll be amazed. But the point is, that's actually all a bridge ever needs to be. Right. So let's come back up here a bit. Oh look. Oh yeah, this or that or this. Right, now I can see great big slots here, so I'm going to attack it carefully but firmly, always pointing back a bit, using as wide as I can really, because that will help to keep it sort of looking uniform, and also obviously being careful not to tilt back and run so far back that we crash into the headstock and make a horrible mess out of it. But even still, we've got a load of room to go, so we're getting down to a little, barely a little. It'll be like Errol Flynn's moustache by the time I finish this. Who else has got a moustache like that? Ron and Russ from Sparks. Remember them? But they both have moustaches. Kind of look stupid if they didn't. This town ain't big enough for the both of us. It's kind of pre-Queen operatics, wasn't it, that song? Right. We are really, really close to the edge close to where we want to be. So, let's have a look. How's it looking? Yeah. Tilting back. Lovely. Now, as we get down closer, much closer. Who sang that song? It's Yes, isn't it? One step closer. As you come down to near the end, now you want to sort of round off the little edgy bits now, because what we don't want is to crash into those and cut your hands, and so they'll be a little bit sharp if we don't round them off. So a bit of rounding off never hurt anyone. So now we are really down to a good height, and as a final nuance, we can now make the final curtain. Oh, he's missed the rollers. Mr. Mannering. Yeah, we can now get down. Oh, I haven't finished the nut because the nut is rough. I'll have to polish it with a different grade of paper, and just check that it's kind of not funny shaped, because it's easy that it's got a bit of wibble on it. It's looking groovy. By comparison, the plain strings are still quite far down, so I'll when I've got them to the exact height, I will then also I will make sure that I take a bit more down on that side. So again, it's toing and froing. You know, it's like right now we've banked the fret leveling. Okay, that's done. Nothing about what we're doing now affects that. What we're doing now is fine-tuning the nut. And after these strings have done their work for us, they'll be retired. Amazed that they even lasted this long without breaking, because that's some to-ink and fro-ink. Okay, so we're back to into life, back to reality. Oh, that's yeah, that's the other one, isn't it? Lose yourself in the moment. Music, the moment you own it. That one. M and hem. Right, now we're going for the 0.4, and we're very close. Now, this is the point at which you go, do I try and get there with my actual nut files? And do you know what, they're such crap these days, I don't even like them. But no, I'm not going to. I'm going to use this to get to where I want to go, right? So here we go. Line it up. I want to get exactly on target. And as long as I stay in that slot, now I'm going to use the 24 just to kind of what I call round out the bottom. So that's going to be my working slot. That'll do me. Now we're going to put this one back in, check the height. That's pretty close already as it is. But it's higher than 0.4, so mind you, says that one. Oh, come on, let's do this properly. So obviously, you know the next step after, that's good, after getting the nut right, we're going to finish off polishing, reducing the nut. We're then going to clean the fingerboard a bit. We're going to mask off the fingerboard, and we're going to recrown the frets, and then get into polishing them all out with all the different grades of paper. So it's quite a long process of finishing the frets off any minute, but we're getting there. That's pretty spot on. I'm happy with that. Now these little plain strings, they're happy to sit on the groove that this thing makes. It's as close to their gauge of string that I've never seen it make a problem or cause a problem. So I really am not going to spend my time digging into the slot with even thinner files when it's going to play just beautifully. The PTFE compound in these Tusq nuts is all you need really to play well, stay in tune. Let's just double check. I know I'll have goo all over my face. I think that'll just about do me. Yeah, that is. So we're right on the mark now. It's beautifully set. 0.4 millimeters. Tiny bit more on here. I think that part of the experience bit is to know when you've got it and not to overcut it, because at this point, right on this mark here now, you could blow it all with a cut too far, and it really is demoralizing when you do that. So you really are being careful at this point. And it's a feel thing as much as anything else. And you have done it for many times. Magnetic, very good. Yeah, having done it loads of times really helps. Now this is a classic example. I'm now going into this slot just for the last little bit with the correct file, and that's either this file seems to either do nothing at all, or if it's in the mood, it leaps forward in one massive jump, in which case you're down too far and you've messed it up. But it's playing okay so far. And, you know, sometimes you don't even really know if it's biting because it's a big flat file or wide file. It's very hard to tell what it's taking. I'm going to stop there. Okay, so we've got the spot on height that we want our strings over the first fret. I could take the strings off right now, but I think just for my peace of mind, what I'm going to do is, actually, you know what, I'm going to leave these three in, and I'm going to try and cut, sand the thing with these three in, because it's these three that are sitting quite low, and it's these three that I want to be clear on getting right as low as I can, but not obviously too far. So having them sitting in there as a guide for me to cut down is very handy. And if I break one now at this point, it doesn't matter because they've done their job. So you can see how much I'm taking off that side. Now we've got a bit in the middle now, which is needs a bit of work too. So I'll take that one down. Whoops. You can hear me hitting the metal there, so that's a good time to stop. Right, I am happy. What a nut that is. I wish you could all join me here. Oh, really love Guitar Central, and see how beautiful that nut. I mean, look at the mwah-ness of it. Darlings, it's beautiful. Right, now, having done that to the nth degree, got it beautiful looking nut. You know, and you remember what it looked like at the beginning. It was an ugly, mile-high thing, but now it is a svelte, perfectly dressed, suave 007 character of a nut. Look at that. I mean, that's just so cool. Now, what I also want to do with this now is I want to give it a little bit of a going over with this lighter grit, just so that we sort of, it's got a little bit of a hump there which we could well do without. So I'm just taking down a bit there, and now I think what I'll just do is I'll get a bit of 100 grit, whatever it is, 1,000. Let's put a bit of 1,000. It's quite a big jump, but why not? Jump to 1,000, and the satisfaction really at this point is, although it's still covered in dust and everything looks massively messy, etc., etc., looks Lionel messy, what we know is that we've got the fret heights right, we've got the nut absolutely spot on, it looks great, and it looks like really the business, and really we're we're now just into the tidying up process, you know, the housekeeping, if you like. We're going to sand out we're going to re-crown the frets that we leveled to make sure that they've got a nice fret shape as opposed to a flat spot. And then we're going to tape off everything and polish them out. Well, it's just gorgeous. I like it. Who would have known? And it's got the Gordon Smith screws as well. Right, undo, release. Release the Krakens. So, so when I come to sort of finish this off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some checks, like I'm going to go and make sure that jack is okay, do it up and make sure that it works fine, and then I'm going to check these tuner tuner nuts, and so on, and just make sure everything is working. That's interesting, I didn't realise that spun round. That's an unusual tuner design. The locking part turns around with your, maybe they all do, maybe I just don't know what I'm saying. He doesn't know what he's saying. Now, could I keep these for reuse in another thing? They're long, I suppose they ought to, oughtn't I, to having an extra long set of strings is never a bad thing. So they're short in the sense that they've been cut off quickly in a locking unit, but they're long because they've been through the body on a longer scale guitar. So these actually would, since they're brand new tonight, they would probably do sterling service in another setup as sacrificial strings. So it'd be a false economy to bin them right now. So this is loose, obviously. Right. Now, these little what's-its are a pain. I'll kind of say what I mean in a minute. These little bridge studs are a pain because they're going to try and move. Now remember, it's difficult enough to get them into place because you have to slack the strings every time you want to recheck their position. So I'm just sticking some holes in some green tape, and I'm going to stick them down in a sort of hope, and I've got some more on order. This is a great, best tape in the world for this, but I'm running out. I'm sticking them down in the hope that they will not do any more movement until I'm ready, because I don't really want to have to spend my time trying to refine the height of the bridge, particularly when it's going to require taking the strings off and on and off and on. I'm going to pull the strings out, save them for later, and then it'll be clean up, hand washing time. I can't show you now. As far as the paint finish, I'm going to go with what I've got. It's pretty well disguised actually. It's not a bad simple finish. It's not sophisticated, but it's better than spending weeks trying to fake a professional finish, which is not really possible in this circumstance. So most of it's hidden by the bridge, and it's the same colour pretty much, and it really doesn't catch your eye, and I'm happy with that, because you know, if that's the only visual change really that this guitar's undergone, it's not a bad one, I think. Okay, so but I'll show you later. And the thing is, once we've got it all set up, we can actually, as the very last thing, we can put a little bit more lacquer on there, as much as a little as we want, if it improves it. Just before I go off for a cup of tea, I'll just do this bit, the whatchamacallit, crowning bit. So we mark up all the frets again with the paper Parker marker pen, and then I can see the marks, and then we are going to use the crowning file to re-crown all the frets. And it's a simple process of taking a fret that we've leveled but have done so by putting a flat spot onto it, which isn't ideal. We want it to be shaped more like an arch, but we don't want to, in reshaping it to look like an arch, we don't want to lower the top of the fret anymore, because if we did so, that would mess up the leveling we've just done. So what we do, I don't know how you can see this. How can you see this? What we do is we use the convex diamond coated crowning file, StewMac one, and we run over the top of the frets that we've, in fact I'm going to put this down to do that. No, then you can't see it. What am I doing? Maybe you can, yeah. Then you run over the top, and the purpose of this file is to round off any edges, or the shoulders, if you like, of these flat spots. And so I can see that as the curved edges of this file take off the square-edged flat spots, I can see that it does that, but it does it whilst leaving a little thin line of marker pen down the centre of the fret, and that tells me that I want to try and get that as little as possible, keep going until that's as thin as I can possibly do without breaking the continuity of that little black line, and that will then tell me I've got the fret re-crowned, but in doing so I haven't lowered the overall action, because if there's an untouched marker pen on top, then you know that this tool hasn't touched the top of that fret, which is my way of knowing that I haven't changed the height of it, which would be a really big shame, because if I did, then it would have made the previous step pointless, a waste of time. So this is going through pretty well, and the speed at which I can go through this, by the way, you can see I'm using a brass wire brush to declog the fret. Now we're showing up with some wear here that looks to me like the player was, I can tell actually the player lived here for their work. They lived in this section here, so they were more lead guitar than anything. And I can see some of the wear dents still showing up. Now remember that I've accepted that we're going to live with them, and the aim is that we've got rid of the sharp scratching, and we're going to sand out as much as possible to a smooth finish the remaining dents, but we're not going to remove them completely, because they are pretty substantial wear at certain points. At this part in the neck, usually it's somewhere down here if it's chords, but up here it's lead guitar work, and lots of it by the look of it, which is cool, because it says it's a much loved and much played guitar. Funny thing is, when you do this, the marker pen really does show up. You see those little black grooves. Where are they? Yeah, there they are. Look at that. Those little grooves, little pits. That's where the E, B, and G have been digging in over the years. But as I say, there, hopefully we've got rid of the actual sharp chipping that had happened, and with luck, everything will smooth out quite nicely. But to remove those wear grooves, we really would be taking a lot of material away, which, looking at the age of these frets, I would be quite nervous to do. And in fact, you'd be starting to, if Peters, for example, said, remove all of that, you've got to remove all of that wear, I wouldn't have gone this far. I would have said you need to refret this. It would be a much better economy, because I charge 200 quid to refret this with standard jumbo wire or standard wire like this, and for £100 more than you'd be paying, or 215 with a fixed nut, but to refret and a bit, some more for the thing. But what I'm saying is that if you were just looking for a setup and it needed a refret, the refret and the setup is 200 quid or 215 quid or something, whereas the setup on its own is 115. So really, I end up charging 100 quid more for a completely new set of frets, which, it gets to a point where that makes sense as an economy. Now I'm going to just do, before I go for my cup of tea, I'm going to do one more thing here, just because I like to do this thing. I've done all the hard work now. I'm quite chuffed. I can brush off the dust. I can be kind of ready to take this up in my leisure over a cup of tea, and I'll do it off camera because it's boring. Not that this other stuff wasn't. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo these tuners. Now, I bought a box spanner, okay, for all those people that tell me I'm an absolute clown for not having a box spanner all these years, right? There's two things I'll say to you. Right, first of all, is stunningly, I know how to operate this and tighten them up before I turn them. to such a degree that they don't slip off and grind off the edges of the nut. So you see what I'm doing? I put them on first, and then I wiggle them and tighten them up, and then I've got them freely moving, nuts moving. So that's what I say to you people first, who know so much better. And the second thing is, what I'd say to you is I actually went and bought a, I'm not going to do this because it can't reach. I went and bought a little box spannery type thing, or a socket actually, and I've gone and lost it immediately. So I can't tell you how annoyed I am about that. Now, something about this screwdriver is absolutely refusing to do anything at all. So I have no idea why that is. Let's see if I can make this one. The problem with the way they do these little, whatchamacallit screws, these tuner screws, is they put them in, actually it was coming out anyway, so it was working. They do though, they put them in stupidly close to the, they try to minimise the footprint of the thing, and so they put them in very, very close to the locking part. So unless you've got a very thin screwdriver shaft, you end up scraping against the locking device while you're taking the screw out or putting it back in, which is slightly annoying. These are actually practically falling out, so they really weren't done up. I mean, that's not true. They probably were done up, but since new, you get shrinkage of the guitar, the wood. And what happens is, eventually, it only takes a tiny fraction of a millimetre shrinkage, I mean, a 50th of a millimetre or something, and what happens is the tuners immediately become loose. It's so tiny amount, you'd be amazed how little drying or shrinking it requires. So for example, I've just prepped and reset up a guitar I've just sold, which I made a year ago, and it's been in the spare room on its display shelf all that time. But I'm just going to do something here. And anyway, I took it down and did the full kind of rework and freshen up and everything. And even the tuners on that were loose, because they'd been sat for a year. So a year since it was built was enough shrinkage to make them loose. Now, what I'm doing this bit for, by the way, is for no other reason than once I've got these off, I can actually get into this headstock and give it a polish and make it look new again, or reasonably new, because until that time you can't get in amongst the tuners, and everything never looks quite clean. So fun about a 10-minute detour of taking this off is I can get some of that lovely guitar polish on now, and I can make it as beautiful as I like. In fact, what I'll probably do is I'll leave it off until I've done all the sanding, which means I'm going to put these over here and out of the way in order. Yeah, leave it off. I'll do all my polishing out, and then once that's done, I'll get some paste on here and give it a good clean. I don't have the buffer set up right now, but if I did, I could take it and buff it. It would be the same effect. But I'm really pleased. That looks the business. It looks like it's always been there. Right, that's it. Break time. Cup of tea. See you in a minute. Hello. The thing on the phone says beauty. It seems to have detected beauty in its filter. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have, as you can see, look at the dust and the filth. We have polished these frets, and we are now removing all of the protective masking tape along with a lot of the dust. And you can also see that I've polished them out, the frets, with Autosol, the chrome cleaner, which when you do that, you have to remember, always have to remember to what's the word I'm looking for? Clean down the fingerboard thoroughly with naphtha, because otherwise fingers will go black for weeks on end playing. So that's the first thing. Just in polishing these up to the nth degree, what I've been able to notice is the little marks that remain on the frets, as mentioned before, the kind of limits to what I'm prepared to chase downwards through the fret metal, and I have to make a judgment call and stop at a compromise effectively, what I think will play well and leave the most fret metal. So that's what I've done, and that's where we're at. But it looks absolutely wonderful compared to before, and I'm ready to give it a clean. Give it a good dust off first, and then get another piece of cloth with some of our Coleman's fuel, which is the stuff I use all the time for cleaning guitars. And somebody asked me a question about this on YouTube somewhere, was it? Yeah, YouTube. I think they were telling me that something about alcohol, something wasn't good for finishes, and I'm not sure if he was referring to a time in the past where I think in between having naphtha available and finding some more, I think I sold something called, I don't know, ethyl alcohol or some I can't remember if that was that, but anyway, I sold some stuff that I didn't damage any finish, but I didn't like the feel of it. I knew straight away that it wasn't the same. It didn't evaporate. It evaporated quicker than this stuff. Naphtha has a kind of nice, slightly, and it sounds odd, but it has a slightly oily feel, which it isn't, but it feels a little bit like that compared to this alcohol thing, which basically evaporated pretty quickly and didn't do the same sort of job. Anyhow, so I think when I first started doing this, I was able to find a UK seller of, you know, like a commercial chemical seller, and you could buy a 5 litre flagon of naphtha. But of course the problem with naphtha is it's a generic name referring to a kind of group of similar petroleum derivative things, and that sounds like stock market, but you know what I mean, sort of petroleum type stuff made from petroleum. Anyway, so having found some that was perfectly good, and it was evidently naphtha, or near to naphtha as the lighter fluid as you can judge, I used that for a while, and then eventually ran out of that, and that's when I tried to find the other stuff. And what I discovered at that point in time is that they no longer sold it in the UK. I think it wasn't even allowed to be sold, so that was a problem. So I had to go and try and find another source, and eventually I found out that the next best source you could get in the UK was Coleman's fuel, this stuff here, and it's camping gas. It's a camping stove fuel, but it does a great safe inert solvent job. By the way, I've soldered the earth wire, bridge earth, remember? I've soldered that to the common earth on the top of the pot. It may be there is another one, but I can't figure out, and I absolutely cannot see where it would be, so that is somewhat beyond me. Okay, so you can see that's used up or ruined that rag. I'm just going to wash my hands with water, because the next stage will be to give this a rub down. It probably doesn't need polishing out, the finish is pretty good. I think with a clean cloth that will just shine up perfectly well, and then we can string up, and so I get a clean cloth, give it a rub down. So that's why I wanted the tuners off, so I can just clean this headstock nice and flat, so it doesn't trap any dirt in between the tuners, which it will do left to its own devices. And we can rub this down. Now at the moment I can't quite get in where the bridge is because I've got green tape, which is keeping the height doofers in position, but I can give all this a clean, and then basically we'll replace the tuners, and then in a minute we'll come round to the business of screwing them back in. But it's a nice thing to be able to clean that up. Come back. So I did. I also cleaned these. I give these a going over with water salt. Yeah, I said that. The reason I was mentioning it again is because it's very appropriate that I did it with the Dremel type tool, the Proxon tool that Big Stevie gave me that he wasn't using in his workshop. So he sent it down to me, and I've been using it ever since. That's got to be 3 or 4 years now. Probably more. Time absolutely whizzes by, does it not? So, Big Steve, I hope you'll get a look at this sometime. I'm sure you will, because with your interest in the large 7-to-6 conversion. But thank you, Steve, for being a great Reloved Guitars supporter. I know you've been having a tough time recently, judging by Facebook. I just hope, fingers crossed, and I don't do prayers because I'm not religious, but all positive thoughts to you. You've been a great supporter and friend of Reloved Guitars over the last few years, and a generous benefactor as well as a good customer. So I hope you bounce back. Whatever's laid you a bit low. So I'm just going to put these in. Now I just want to get a feel of this. I'm wondering whether these are already too stripped out, or they're going in. That's okay, and they're staying, but they don't feel like they're stiffening up very much. So it may be that they've kind of reached the end of their ultra tightening. These are Schecter branded tuners. Little jobs like this I'd much prefer to do by hand, i.e. not with the power screwdriver, so you can sort of get a bit of feedback from the thing you're working with. Power drivers just seem to go off with a mind of their own. Okay, so after all of that, we are closing in on the final chucker, or whatever they used to call it. And what's great about having gone, the process I've gone through to get here, is I already know this thing's going to play great, because we've had the 6 strings on it and made a noise, and it's a credible guitar, which is brilliant. So I can't wait to get it to Big Pete. Sorry, Pete, if that's if it's an insult, tell me offline, and I'll never say it again. But yeah, we can't wait to get it up to him. I'm also going to put some oil on the fingerboard as well, just to make it nice and clean. Oh look, I'm using a very deftly operated adjustable spanner to tighten up these tuners. All right, look, and I know how to get it lovely and tight without before I put any loading onto it. See? Oh gosh, it seems to work. This cracks me up. Remember, I think I've said, you probably heard me say this before, but I remember somebody once arriving on my channel and telling me what an absolute useless piece of whatever I was, because I didn't have a stroboscopic, Peterson's tuning device thing. So how could I call myself, how could I possibly even begin to think I could set the intonation on the guitar if I didn't have one of those? And it's one of these characters that seem to think that your skill is only is your ability is linked to whatever you've spent. So presumably owns a sports car. But anyway, and the thing is, I don't think at the time I could be bothered to point out to him that when you're dealing with intonation, there's a variable at work in setting your intonation or measuring your intonation, which is so gross in the true sense of the word, meaning so large compared to the other variables, that it makes a mockery of trying to achieve refinement in the other variables, or in the process. So for example, if I said to you, one of the key variables in checking and setting your intonation is the force with which you individually press down on the strings, and that force changes every time you do it, so you probably never do it exactly the same twice. You probably have an average. But if I told you that no two people did it the same and your hand grip would be completely different from mine, and therefore the intonation setting would change substantially between you fretting the string on the same guitar and me fretting it, right? If I told you all that, then anyone with half a brain would realise that there is absolutely no point spending 6,000, 7,000 quid on some tuning system, when we can't even control how hard we fret the note or the string, two frettings in a row. And if you kind of understand that, then you'll realise that criticism that you haven't got a Peterson tuner or whatever it was, it is a bit laughable, because the gross variables at work are so great that it just makes mockery of trying to be that precise with it. But of course, the person making the comment had no idea about that at all. Now, the challenge here is, I imagine it could well be that this bridge is fairly well set up in terms of intonation already. It looks like it's come staggered, but we've no idea how that relates to the position on this guitar. So it may well be, I'm horrified to say, it may well be that we have to do the intonation. Now, if we have to do the intonation, it's going to be an absolute balls ache, if you excuse my English, because we can't, we could barely get to the screws to do the intonation. But even if we could, the biggest problem is that they're very, very stiff because they've been painted over. And as a result of that, we're almost certainly sort of grind the, gnarl up the slot in the screw if we try to do it A, from an inaccessible angle, and B, when it's stiff. So, as a result, I've got some glue on here, let's get that polished out. So as a result, I'm going to have to sort of do a bit of backwards and forwardsing in order to get this right. Let me just polish this out. It's like a scuff of tape or something. Yeah, so I just, if we got it right the first time, great. If not, I'm going to have to do some consecutive guesses, which is always, it's a bit like when you have to do truss rod adjustments and the truss rod's down at the heel end. You've got no choice but to slack your strings off, get in at that end. Sometimes you have to crack the, take off the neck screws and hold the neck out and get to the adjuster. Guess how much it might take, have a go at it, put the whole thing back together again, load it with all the strings again, and then discover that it really still doesn't work, and you have to do a bit more. And it is a real bullshit, I tell you now. Okay, right, look at this. We are very close to, apart from the nightmare of intonation, which I will pray to the gods of, I said I wasn't religious, I'm not, but I'm joking. I pray to the gods of intonation that the people at Schaller will have set that correctly for me, so I don't have to suffer. Please, Schaller gods, or guitar gods. Right, here we go. I'm going to thread F strings. Oh, yikes. Come on, this ain't that hard. Would you like to go through? It's just a through hole. For real? Are you really fighting me to go through that hole? Thank you. Do that. So it's 3, miss 1, 3. Remember that, don't you? 3, miss 1, 3. Yeah. Well, it's Thursday, so I wouldn't be sending this tomorrow anyway, because I don't like sending on Fridays, because I don't know where the guitars end up sitting. They don't get delivered on Saturdays unless you pay a huge premium. And my experience is the only time I've paid the Saturday premium, I think they missed the delivery anyway, so yeah, they did. So I'm never going to waste an extra 12 quid or something to deliver on a Saturday when there's not a lot of promise they will. In fact, funnily enough, sometimes they let you down on that, but then other days, if it suits them, they'll deliver it on a Saturday to stop them having to come on a Monday, even though you haven't paid the money. So it's hard to know. I sound like I'm complaining about Parcel Force, but I have to say I'm not, because they have been great for me up to now. I must have sent over 800 guitars to customers over the last 7 years or whenever it is, and I have 100, literally not kind of close to, but an absolute 100% no damage, no loss record in all that time. God, this is fiddly. Which means, you know, it's absolutely not worth. I mean, you shouldn't underestimate what it means. It means that over 800 times out of 800 times, parcel force has. By the way, I've tightened up the jack socket. Parcel force has successfully delivered my packages. It's never broken anything. That's a lot to do with my packaging, but nonetheless, it has never broken anything. And they've also never lost anything, which is a lot to do with their trustworthiness. So I absolutely, not only can't I fault them, I would not change my formula and go with another carrier, or change the way I package, or the sort of approach I take. I'm absolutely more than happy with the system the way it is, or how it works for me. So 800 or so. And actually, the other thing to say is I've had that many, nearly that many, sent back to me using my own instructions and how-to packaging how-tos. And again, thanks to Parcel Force, and a lot as well to do with customers following my how-to instructions. I've never had a customer guitar damaged, which again is incredible. So long may that record continue. But you know, quite often I find myself coming in on the tail end of one of these forum discussions, and they're very common. Actually, I keep moving this thing, see, look, I'm already spinning it round. There's very often discussions in guitar forums where people complain. It's a very common, popular thing to sort of whinge about a particular courier and blame them for, you know, and usually what happens, it's somebody who's, the people who made this, it's good stuff, right? But a stupid bottle, right? Idiotic bottle. If you're watching Secret Sauce, people, that's what it does all the time. And the first time it did it, it was so full that it went and blepped it all out, all over the table that I was working at. So an absolutely dozy construction, production decision. Anyway, yes, people are forever kind of immediately saying, you know, if somebody says, oh, who should I use to send a guitar? And everybody jumps on and goes, don't touch Hermes, don't touch Parcel Force, they're cowboys, don't touch DPD, don't touch UPS, and don't touch this and don't touch that. And everybody has their story. The first time they ever sent a guitar, their first and only time, this, that, or the other courier smashed it up, and they're complete cowboys, and they will never use them again as long as they shall live, etc., etc. And then I kind of weighed in and I go, how then could it be that I've got 800, more than 800 actually, you know, over 800, no loss, no damage in all that time? How could it possibly be that all of you got your guitars broken on the first time you sent it, right? And I've done it 800 times, and not one of mine has got broken or damaged or lost or whatever. And they haven't got an answer to it, and they absolutely refuse to even countenance that it might have something to do with the way they package their guitars, or the way they did on that occasion. And it's absolutely not up for discussion. It certainly wasn't anything to do with their packing decisions. It's all to do with those useless couriers, insert name here. I just think it's a real pity, because when you come down to it, the disappointment and sadness of smashing a guitar in transit, whether it's one you've sold to somebody and by rights you want nothing more than for it to get there safely and be loved by the new owner, or whether it's you know, one that somebody sent to you and you've lost it because it's smashed in transit, you know, or whatever. So if only people would face up to the part they have to play in it. You would just listen to somebody else's experience. So if somebody said to me, if I had broken, the first guitar I'd ever sent got broken, and then somebody came on in my position and said, oh well, I've sent 800 and not a single problem with any of them. There's only two things you can really be saying about that. It's either one is you're lying and I don't believe you couldn't possibly have done it, therefore I'll carry on blaming the courier, or well, if you're telling the truth, then I've clearly done it the wrong way, and I'm going to change the way I do it and enjoy my parcels getting there safe and sound. That's the only possible options you've got, really. And yet they don't. They just carry on believing what they want to believe, which is that Parcel Force are rubbish, or Hermes are rubbish, or whoever. It must be awful to work in one of these couriers, to be in that situation the whole time where you literally can't win because the people don't package their stuff properly. But the problem is they think they have, and that they don't necessarily, they haven't thought out the physics of it, right? I don't mean that to say, to insult them. They haven't thought about it, and I'm the only one that has. But the reason I thought about it is because I'm naturally cautious about that kind of thing anyway. But also because actually, when you think about it as a business, the only thing I'm really, not the only thing, the primary thing of all the things I'm delivering with my service, the primary one is getting the guitar back to you intact, right? And what I mean by that is, there's no point, it doesn't matter how good a setup I've done on it, if I send it back to you guaranteed to get it broken in the post, right? So I might as well not have done anything. So it's quite clear that my number one priority is to get it back to you intact. Obviously, behind that is doing a great setup that you're going to think is worth the money when you get the guitar back. That's clearly pretty high up on the list too. But it's secondary to getting it back intact, which is why I have some situations where people, I've just put it in the wrong damn hole. Look, I have some situations where people will say to me, well, look, does it really have to cost £25 to get it back to me? And, because I've looked on Parcel Force, or actually better yet, they'll say, I've looked on Parcel Monkey, and they're offering a discounted Parcel Force for $8.99 or something, right? And I go, well, okay, they're offering $8.99. But that's good. That's good if you can find that. I stick with Parcel Force because the formula has never let me down. So forgive me if I don't go shopping around to the companies who don't have as big a reputation as Parcel Force. But the main thing is, they'll say something like, well, can't you reuse the packaging that whoever sent it to you or I sent it to you in? And I have to say to them, with all respect, you may have gone, made a big effort to get it to me, and you may have got it to me in one piece. That's great. I'm happy you did. However, at the point of it sending it back to you, I still have to look at it afresh and say, right, done the work. There's a pile of packaging there, which is usually in shreds because I had to get into it to do the work. And now, guess what my number one priority is? I've done all the hard work at setting it up, but my number one priority still remains getting it back to you intact. And I am not going to take the risk of doing it a different way from how I've done it 800 plus times successfully because you want to save £5 on packaging, or whatever it is that the difference is that you think it will save. And I don't mean that as, honestly, you can tell I don't mean that in a bad way. I just want, if ever that sort of runs through your mind about why can't it be cheaper, I just want you to understand that's why it isn't cheaper, because at the point I'm looking at it, my number one priority is get it back to you, and I will do whatever it takes to be certain that's going to happen. All right. And if you have a view that you could save a few quid, or if I did it differently, I'm not going to do it because you want to save a couple of quid. I'm not going to jeopardize my ability to get it back to you, which is discharging my first responsibility. So sometimes I have to kind of say that in as stern and as friendly way as possible, but it's really, really critical, because that, in a sense, that's what I'm most responsible for. If I've done all the hard work and then I skimp on the packaging, or I use a method or an approach that I have no confidence or experience in, and it doesn't get to you in one piece because I changed the method, then, to be honest, what am I going to do? Am I going to say, well, it's at the, it is at the customer's risk that we send backwards and forwards, but even if I'm not obliged to give you the money for your broken guitar, I'm not going to feel at all great about how unhappy you're going to be, the fact that your guitar's bust, because I kind of agreed to what you were saying and changed the way I was packaging. So I just literally, I'm not going to do it. So that explains why it is what it is and why it cost what it cost. Hello. Gosh, that's cool. Oh, that's interesting. No, I was going to say it looks a higher first fret action, but it isn't. It looks it only because the frets this time are completely clean and shiny. I can see the gap better. So at this point I'm giving it a bit of a sort of hefty tug and being careful as I get up closer to the top, because I don't want to bust any strings, but I do want to sort of bed them in. Now we're in the sort of final stages now. Yeah. That's a cut end, scraping past the other bit. Now what I haven't got here is, I can't do this on camera, my tuner is back home, at home, where the home is, home near where the hearth is, so I'm going to have to do that last bit at home. It's not far off. I have a feeling that's a little flat. That's about right. Okay, yeah, we need a bit more of a line there. So I'm absolutely not going to do this. Remember I said I'm not going to dig in here and try and do this with stiff what's-its. I'm going to take this home to where I've got the tuner, and I'm going to sit quietly. Because this really, I'm not gonna send this tomorrow. I'll send it Monday with all the other guitars, big crop of guitars going out. So I will take this home. I will do the intonation at home. But I have to say, I'm really chuffed with this. It's done. We've got the original Kerr knobs to do here. By the way, when you're putting knobs back on with side-on screws, this guitar is quite old, you know. It's got grub everywhere, grime, and anyway, when you put screws on, knobs on with this kind of screw, whatever it's called, grub screw, make sure the grub screw is pressing in the same direction as the slot in the shaft. Right, let's draw it on here. See what you can see. The whiteboard, ladies and gentlemen. Right, the whiteboard. Oh, right, sorry. Right. Half, shaft, split, something like that. Get me drift? Yay! That's the shaft, and it sort of has the splines kind of there, like that. You got it, haven't you? And it's dark in there, right? All dark in that crevice. And look, just be really proper. It's like that. That looks so real, doesn't it? So the point being is, when you come to put your knob on top, put your knob on so that the grub screw is in this plane, right? So it's pointing across along with the slot. So your grub screw will kind of be down here actually. So in this plane, there's your grub screw coming in from the side, right? And that way it will press against this gap. If you push it in from this side, you know what will happen, don't you? It'll pinch those two sides of the pot together in a way that you don't really want to happen. How about that? There you go, just a little bit of, you probably knew that, but if you didn't know that, that's what I would advise. So to do that, you've obviously got to kind of get it all in place, line it up as bestest you canest, and then have a go at, this is a push-pull, so it needs to be able to grab it and pull it up, pull it down. Very good. In the plane where I was born. This one doesn't want to go on at all. Why doesn't it want to go on to? This one doesn't naturally go on. There we go. This third one. That's just a tone. And this one is, let's switch it around to there. Hammer on. This is also push, pull, pull, push. There we are. That's it. So, ladies and friends and gentlemen, the ultra-wide 6-string Hellraiser Schecter, and of course the final little bit is to put the coffin-shaped, almost coffin-shaped, whatchamacallit, on the back. And for this, I don't mind using the low torque thingamajig. I've lost my ability to talk. Let's put it on 1, let it go. And there we have it. I think that's a pretty neat outcome. And I hope Peter, neither big nor small Peter, will enjoy this conversion. Mark Phillips, if you're watching, hello, Mr. Pioneer of some of eBay's earliest 7 to 6 string conversions. Mark did quite a lot of these, probably still does, has done quite a lot of these in his time. Mark has a different approach to me. He typically uses the existing bridge and cuts his own new, I don't know what you'd call it, spacing things, notches into it. And it's, you know, in a sense, it saves the customer quite a bit of money because, as you can see, this Schaller bridge here costs 50 quid, minimum 50 quid, probably sometimes 70, depending on what the market's doing. Funnily enough, if it's scarce, it costs more. But you know, I prefer this method because I think it's quite neat. I think that's a very elegant little solution. So that's me done for today. I'm going to pack up and shut down the shop. Another day, another job tomorrow. But thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. And Pete, thank you for choosing me to do your 7 to 6 conversion. I really do hope that this gives you, that's not in tune exactly, but I hope it gives you a great new lease of life in guitar playing. Now, we briefly discussed how much of the real estate down at the nut I was going to use. Realistically, I've used most of it. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me to sort of go from this conversion business and then not to use all of that new space. Some sort of hurricane going on out there. Not to use all this space that we made available. So the thing I learned, by the way, one last thing, anybody coming to use this thing, I learned that this has a way round. And if you turn it the other way around, the G sticks out. And I don't know why that would be. It's just very weird. Somehow the other way around it works, right? With the other way around, and that's unusual because for most tune-o-matic bridges, they genuinely do go either direction without causing a mismatch in the heights. This is an odd one, but I'm glad I figured it out and I shall remember it for the one at the weekend, which will be the Matt Heafy 7-string Epiphone 7-string Matt Heafy. Got to leave here in a minute. Okay, thanks for watching. See you again soon.